Welcome to Blood Moon Publishing.
Prologue. My name is Elara Darwin, and that is all you are getting out of me. Just kidding, you are in my head, so I am pretty sure you will basically know everything about me, which I am now finding very disturbing. In case you haven't already noticed, I am writing this story in the second person, so basically, I will be indirectly talking to you all throughout the story of my life. Fun, don't you think? Anyway, why don't we just get going with this? Oh yeah, just a little note. I am from Canada, but my mom is from the States, so there will be quite a mix of American and Canadian dialect in this story. Let's get moving. As I mentioned earlier, my name is Elara. It's a boring name. Don't worry, I have been informed of this by many of my friends. So, no need for the chivalrous gesture you were about to bestow upon me with the announcement of my utterly boring name. Although the word chivalrous may not be the word to describe the act that you were about to partake in, considering that it is a word often applied by gentlemen. And I am pretty sure that many of you reading this are teenage girls, so this word can't really apply. But I am certain you all got the message I was putting out there, right? Oh well, I think we've spent enough time discussing this subject. My name is boring, we all get it. Now, to move on. Well, the great journey of my life started when I was conceived, then born, and then I grew up with not much happening to me. I had a pretty stable childhood, if I do say so myself. Well, other than being dropped on the head as a baby by my 3-year-old brother, Connell. But other than that, I was good. For the most part. Before me, my parents had 2 children and 3 more after me. Being around so many people was quite something, not only mentally, but also physically. Basically, we messed with each other all the time. When I was younger, my older brother, Connell, would sneak up behind me and jump scare me until I was a nervous wreck. Yeah, it was bad. We were also kind of rough when it came to playing outside, and we really didn't do things on the safe side. For example, we have 4-wheelers at my house, and in the winter, we would connect saucers to a rope, then to the 4-wheeler, and then you would drive around with someone on the saucer at the back. There were a couple of times when I hit a pole or just face-planted into the snow. Along with that, there were also the trampoline experiences, like too many people jumping up and down, doing bum flops and such, and well, there may have been a few instances where I landed on my little sister's head. Nothing major. Just to list a few more. My brother's mishap with a jigsaw, my sister getting a bit too competitive during hockey and breaking her arm, my brother hitting a tree and getting short-term memory loss. You know the works. I had an awesome family life. Like, seriously, it was wonderful. So much so that I am actually going to the same university as my brother, and we are actually roommates. Yeah, I know, right? How many siblings actually do that? Some of you may be wondering whether that would be awkward, but our parents instilled very strong moral standards from the time we were kids. Even though most people would have totally disregarded it, it was so firmly implanted in us that it almost felt wrong to do otherwise. But whatever, right now it was mid-October, and I was back for Thanksgiving. I was currently going from stall to stall at the market in my hometown of Woodstock. My hands were literally stuffed. You know how it feels when you have so many bags in your hands, and the weight cuts off all circulation? Yeah, well, that is what I was feeling at the moment. I was just walking back towards my vehicle, well, my mom's, to be exact. I couldn't afford a car while I was in university. I was walking to the car, minding my own business, when a low, vibrating hum, almost like a growl, echoed right behind me. This is the moment I froze. I kind of just stood there for a few seconds. I wasn't entirely sure if that was a wolf or what. It wouldn't make sense for a wolf to be out, considering it was mid-morning. I turned around, but I didn't really get a chance to process what was going on. All I heard was a voice rasp the word, mate, and suddenly I was enveloped in an overwhelming presence. It wasn't just a hug, it was like being caught in a magnetic field. He leaned in, his breath warm against the crook of my neck, inhaling as if I were the first breath of fresh air he'd had in years. I stood there, paralyzed by a weird mix of shock and a sudden, inexplicable spark of electricity dancing across my skin. Finally, the practical side of me came to light. I tried to pull back, my shopping bags having already hit the pavement. Don't go, he murmured, his voice sounding more like a command from my own soul than a stranger talking. I tried to shift away again, but he stayed rooted, his arms acting like a protective cage rather than a trap. Look, dude, I get that you're having a moment, and you've clearly mistaken me for someone you know. I mean, I get it, I really do. I totally didn't. But this is a bit much for a Saturday morning. My mom knows a great therapist who deals with boundary issues. Maybe I could get you their number. I didn't get a verbal answer. Instead, a sudden, searing heat flared at the curve of my shoulder, like a static shock turned up to 11. It wasn't a physical blow, but a rush of sensory overload that made the world tilt on its axis. A heavy, honey-like exhaustion washed over me instantly. My knees buckled, and the last thing I felt was the stranger catching me, his scent of wood smoke and rain filling my senses before the world faded to black. Chapter 1. Doo-dump, doo-dump, doo-dump. And that was the ever-so-lovely sound of my head pounding. Trust me, it did not feel good. I had just woken up. Let's just say I thought I had survived the worst. Hangovers, nights spent questioning my life choices, my nephew waking me up at 5 a.m. Trust me, you don't even want to know. But this was by far the most jarring experience I have ever had. My whole body was aching, and I was being bounced up and down in a way that was definitely not pleasant. I just wanted the world to stop moving. I peeked my eyes open for a moment. Oh my Lanta, that was bright. A beam of light pierced my eyes, making my headache spike, so I squeezed them shut again. Suddenly, there was a big bump, and I slid off whatever I was lying on. That was the moment I really opened my eyes and took in my surroundings. I was lying on the floor in the back of an SUV. And we were definitely not on a paved road. I pushed myself up on my elbows, watching the forest zip past the glass in a blur of green and brown. I backed myself up until my spine was pressed against the car door. This was not good. I was most definitely not back at the market. I swallowed hard as the memories came rushing back. That guy, that thing he did. I reached my hand up to the back of my neck. My skin felt tight and feverish. I could feel the raised, jagged edges of a mark, a seal that felt like it was branded into my very soul. I felt totally and completely disgusted. How could a person just decide to do that to someone else? And if he was bold enough to do that in public, what would he do now that he had me alone? Actually, I didn't have to wonder. He already had me. I looked toward the front of the car. There was a man behind the wheel. The same man from the market, or at least I assumed so. I hadn't really gotten a good look at his face before the world went dark, but the sheer aura coming off him was unmistakable. It had to be him. Why would anyone else just take me? Never mind, it didn't matter. I had more important things to worry about. Specifically, getting out of this car. I didn't have my purse, but I had something much more useful. I reached into the hidden pocket of my hoodie and grabbed my phone. I was actually surprised he hadn't checked me for it. He must be incredibly overconfident, or just plain arrogant. I entered my password, thanking the heavens that my volume was off. Once in, I went in my contacts and searched for my brother-in-law Silas. He was a police officer. Me, SOS. Track my phone. Not kidding, I've been taken. I stuffed the phone under my leg immediately. I couldn't risk the dude hearing a notification if Silas replied. A moment later, the screen lit up. Silas. I know you and Connell always play tricks when you're home for the holidays. Give up the act, sista. What? Seriously? This could not be getting any worse. I know Connell and I have pulled some legendary pranks on Silas, but come on. This was literally his job. I guess this was karma finally catching up to me. What was I supposed to do? I couldn't just sit here. I had to take a chance. I opened FaceTime, clicked Silas's name, and hit the camera. I made sure the phone was muted so the guy up front wouldn't hear the ringing. Finally, after an agonizing 30 seconds, Silas's face appeared on the screen. I gulped and pointed the camera at my neck, showing him the dark, angry mark and the distress in my eyes. His expression shifted from annoyed to absolutely horrified in a split second. I turned the camera around to capture the interior of the car and the road behind us. But as the lens panned toward the front, I saw him in the rearview mirror. He was staring right at me with dark, intense eyes. Shit. Chapter 2. Bleepity bleep bleep bleep. I feel like, since there are young girls reading this, I should maybe censor myself? Oh hell, who really cares? At the moment, I'm facing a very scary situation, guys. Like, mind-bogglingly scary. There is a terrifying guy staring me down. My brother-in-law was just pixelating on my screen in a panic. And I am pretty sure my life insurance is about to be claimed. Girls, this is scary. I quickly tapped the end button, terminating the FaceTime with Silas. I stuffed my phone under my leg and looked back up at the dude, taking a heavy gulp. The car was parked on the side of the road. We were in the middle of nowhere. And he was staring at me like I'd just insulted his entire lineage. So, how is this going to go? I asked, my voice trembling only a little. Am I going to have to dig my own grave? Or is this one of those creepy cabin-in-the-woods situations where you reveal you're actually a misunderstood vampire? Because let's be real, you don't have the sparkling in the sunlight vibe going for you. Instead of the anger I expected, his face shifted into pure confusion. Or are you a classic movie villain? You know, the silent but deadly type who doesn't realize that kidnapping a college student is a great way to get a 1-star review on life. I stopped talking for a bit and looked out the window. Yeah, I'm going with this silent grump theory. The confused look remained. Who are you talking to? I gave him the look. You know the one, the blank stare and raised eyebrow we give when someone is being remarkably slow. Don't look at me like that, he growled. I rolled my eyes. Whatever. If you're going to end me, I'm not giving you the satisfaction of understanding my inner monologue. I crossed my arms. He growled again, and the confusion vanished, replaced by that dark, intense heat. Crap. 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 So, what now? I asked. He clenched his jaw, turned back to the steering wheel, and slammed the car into gear. I guess the torture for now was just the sheer anticipation. I sat there imagining the worst, being locked in a cellar, missing my entire life, maybe being forced to fold his laundry for eternity. I sighed and moved from the floor to the back seat. At least I wasn't tied up. I saw my phone lying on the floor. He still hadn't taken it. This guy was officially the world's worst kidnapper. I was about to text Silas again when the car pulled over once more. The guy turned around, his hand held out. I almost forgot. Phone. I let out a huff and slapped the device into his palm. Happy? Very, he grumbled. I didn't sleep for the rest of the ride. How could I? I was way too young for this. I haven't finished school. I haven't even met my future soulmate yet. I had plans, people. I was staring out the window, but I wasn't seeing the trees anymore. I didn't even notice the humongous mansion we had pulled up to until the car stopped. The door opened, and I got a breath of fresh air. The driver stood right outside. Get out. I rolled my eyes and climbed out. Before you judge me for not running, the dude was a literal mountain. My cardio is walking to the fridge, his is chasing prey. I knew my limits. I looked up at the elegant mansion. I would have thought you'd bring me somewhere less fancy to do your villainous deeds. For crying out loud, I'm not going to hurt you. I cringed. Well, you or your friend marked me, so what am I supposed to think? Look, I didn't do that. He did. He'll be here later, he said, his voice tight. Oh, great. So I had to wait for my master to arrive. Lovely. I looked around. I could run. Don't even think about it, he warned. There are eyes everywhere. You won't get out of here. Trust me. I raised my eyebrows. You left me with a smartphone for 90% of the trip, buddy. Why should I believe you have a comprehensive security plan? You're a bit forgetful. His eyes turned pitch black. That was a mistake. One you won't get to exploit again. He grabbed my arm firmly, but without the aggression from before, and led me into the house. Before I could process the crown molding, I was in a lavish bedroom, the door shut, and the lock clicked. Awesome. I was stuck in that room for what felt like forever. I missed Thanksgiving dinner. I missed an English paper. I missed my psychology test. My GPA was dying, and honestly, that was scarier than the kidnapper. If he was going to ruin my grades, I was going to ruin his guest room. I had spent the afternoon redesigning the place. Specifically, I was playing with the feathers from the pillows I'd ripped open. They were everywhere. It was the only thing keeping me sane. I was just tossing a handful of down into the air, waiting for my daily meal, when the door banged open. Someone came charging into the room. I looked up and I knew instantly. This was the one. The one who started this. The one who bit me. The one who is currently responsible for my failing grade in Psych 101. The Alpha had arrived. Chapter 3. Well, here he was, standing in front of me. At the moment, I didn't really care how book boyfriend he looked. The dude marked me. He actually marked me. How many times do I have to repeat that? The guy was a freak, a total and complete freak. I shuddered. I got up from my spot on the bed, feathers fluttering down from my shirt as I moved. Note to self, ripping open pillows is therapeutic but very messy. Standing on the opposite side of the room, I crossed my arms and raised an eyebrow. This was the look, the one I give when I am completely and totally unimpressed. I didn't care that he was freakishly good-looking. That didn't make up for his total disregard for personal space and basic human rights. The guy started walking toward me. Oh my goodness, I think this is it. This is the point where I actually meet my demise. I was going to be a headline. A statistic. A very tragic, missing student poster. Please don't hurt me. I still have a midterm to write, and I would really like to say I at least survived that portion of university, I blurted out, shying away as he closed the gap between us. He stopped mid-step. I'm not going to hurt you, he said, his voice dropping an octave. I looked up surprised. But then the logic set in. There were many other things that could happen besides physical harm. I backed away further. He gave me a confused look. I told you I wouldn't touch a hair on your head. Why are you still shrinking away from me? I stood up a little taller, channeling my inner drama queen. Technically, you said you wouldn't hurt me. You could still keep me trapped here, sell me to a traveling circus, or a gazillion other awful things my brain is too tired to think of right now. So don't blame me for being wary of a guy who kidnapped me. I took a breath. Gosh, I hate it when I run out of points. It always sounds better when you have a list of 3. I am not going to harm you, he repeated, sounding almost pained. I rolled my eyes. Well then, why the heck am I here? I gestured wildly at the room. Trust me, you won't get a ransom out of my parents. They've been in debt since the 90s. There is no money. I don't want money, he said, his eyes darkening to a pitch-black intensity. I just want you. Okay, hold up. You expect me to stay here? Merely because you want me to? Dude, I can't even get over the fact that you marked my shoulder. And you want me to stay? To stay? He took another step closer, stuffing his hands into his jeans. He looked me directly in the eyes. Yes. Well, I'm leaving then, I said, pivoting toward the door. No, you're not, I heard him say calmly behind me. I ignored him and grabbed the handle, twisting with all my might. It was locked. I didn't even hear a click. How? I turned back around. You know you can't do this, right? It's against every law ever. Plus, I have a life. Just because you have an over-attachment to a random stranger doesn't mean you can rip me away from my reality. Do you know what this is doing to my GPA? I have papers due. People to see. Family members to annoy. I don't have time for this. I was practically yelling by the end of it. I took a big gulp of air. The guy was clenching his jaw now, his fists tight at his sides. Okay, so maybe yelling at my supernatural kidnapper wasn't my brightest idea. Why don't I ever use common sense? Now I was definitely going to regret it. I know I'm being repetitive with the I'm gonna die thing, but if you were here, you'd be thinking it too. Please don't be mad, I squeaked as his glare hardened. He started stalking toward me, eyes glowing with a dark fire that made me shudder. He stopped right in front of me, pinning me against the door with his sheer presence. He was way too close. I wasn't going to go all Stockholm Syndrome on him. I mean, the guy was a lawbreaker. There was nothing attractive about that, right? I already too. I cut him off by pushing against his chest. He was crowding me. But as soon as my hands touched him, a jolt of electricity, like 1,000 tiny sparks, raced from my fingertips to my toes. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog. It must be psychological. Stress-induced static? Yeah, let's go with that. Disgust shivers? Totally. He was staring at me with those pitch-black eyes. I'm pretty sure that wasn't a natural eye color. It was terrifying. I gulped. Thankfully, he didn't move. He just searched my eyes for what felt like an eternity. I would suggest, he rasped, that next time you don't push me away. You might not like the distance it creates. Then, he pulled a key from his pocket, brushed past me with a scent of cedar and rain, unlocked the door, and walked out. The door clicked shut again. He was gone, and I was still stuck in this gilded cage. Chapter 4. Alone, alone, alone. It was making me go insane, guys. I am a social person. I love people. But then again, I also kind of hate them. I like my space, but I like the world too. My brain is a contradiction. The guy who marked me hasn't shown up since that night. I'm not sure if I'm happy or upset about that. It would be nice to have someone to talk to, but since he's a total mystery man with boundary issues, I wasn't exactly sending him thinking of you cards. I was just lonely. And bored. Mostly bored. I was obviously spending too much time on my own. I had to get out. The door was locked. The windows were locked. And the thought of a literal pack of people waiting in the woods to catch me was a lot. What sane girl wouldn't be freaked out? That was why I hadn't tried to escape yet. But I was at the end of my rope. I have to admit, I'm not exactly a high-stakes adventurer. I usually stick to the safe side. But here, there is no safe side. Even if he said he wouldn't hurt me, he's still my captor. It had been 2 days. It was time to go. I was going to escape if it was the last thing I ever did. I mean, who cares if there are dozens of people roaming around the woods, waiting in the shadows with creepy slasher movie grins? I'm fast. I can outrun a cliché. With that pep talk finished, I marched over to the window. I grabbed the heavy lamp from the bedside table and crash, shattered the glass. I may be a scaredy cat 78% of the time, but the other 22% was currently in charge. I threw the heavy comforter over the jagged edges of the frame to protect my skin. I dragged a chair to the window, stepped up, and threw one leg over. The October wind whirled through the leaves like little mini witches on broomsticks. And, just like those witches, I was feeling a massive rush of adrenaline, mixed with the very real fear of jumping 2 stories down. Deep breaths, Elara. Deep breaths. This was the single scariest thing I'd ever done voluntarily. I think I can. I was becoming the little engine that could. Pathetic. But hey, that train reached its objective. I swung my other leg out and pushed off the wall, making the biggest jump of my life. I landed with a dull thud, hissing as a jolt of pain shot through my feet. Nothing broken, just a sore tush and a bruised ego. I had to move. A girl's gotta do what a girl's gotta do. I started running. I ran as fast as my legs would carry me, flying down the dirt lane. I heard shouts behind me, but for some reason, no one was actually chasing me. I didn't stop to think about why. I just needed to find a town, call my family, and get back to my average, normal life. Standing in the driveway, I watched as she ran. My internal instincts were howling, clawing to go after her. I pushed them down. She wouldn't get far. She would soon realize there was nothing but wilderness for miles. I'd let her run for a while, under the watchful eyes of my scouts, of course. She needed to understand the reality of her situation. She needed to know that out here, the world was vast, and I was her only true anchor. It was getting dark and, don't laugh, but I am freakishly scared of the dark. I blame my brother, Connell. The number of times he's jump-scared me in the middle of the night has literally scarred me for life. No one should have to experience that kind of horror. I had been walking down this dirt road for what felt like forever. I didn't have my phone, so I had no idea what time it was. All I knew was that the shadows were getting longer, and I was pretty sure the woods were full of things that go bump in the night. I covered my eyes for a second. I just wanted to go home. I wanted my mom's Sunday roast and mashed potatoes. Was that too much to ask? Oh, and a pint of ice cream. That would be perfect. Suddenly, bright lights cut through the darkness from up the road. I shielded my eyes. They had their high beams on. I held my thumb out, praying for a miracle. A truck slowed down beside me, the window rolling down to reveal a gorgeous blonde woman. She looked friendly, which was my first requirement for a getaway driver. Need some help? She asked with a kind smile. Yeah. Can you give me a ride? I just need to get to the nearest town, I said, trying not to sound as desperate as I felt. Sure, jump in. Civilization is pretty scarce up here, but I can get you to the main road, she said. I climbed into the front seat, a wave of relief washing over me. I was finally getting out of this place. What do you mean you lost her? My voice was a low growl as I glared at the man standing in my office. A vehicle picked her up. The driver was human. We couldn't intervene without a direct confrontation in front of a witness, the scout explained, bowing his head. I am sorry. I clenched my fists so hard the wood of my desk groaned. I wanted to snap. I wanted to roar. I let out a long, strangled breath instead. Out, I said. The man didn't wait. He scrambled out of the office, as if the floor were on fire. She was gone. And while it was his failure, I knew the truth. It was mine too. Chapter 5. For hours. That is how long we have been driving. My lower half has officially staged a protest. The level of soreness is out of this world. Everyone in this nation knows what it's like because everyone has had to endure a marathon road trip at some point. Maybe I should stop talking about my seat. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Well, Lyra is cool. Lyra is the girl who picked me up on the side of the road. I got picked up by a pickup truck. Look at me, making puns while in the middle of a crisis. Anyway, I thought I should start this off with us actually getting somewhere, like an actual town, and not fill it up with trivial conversation. But then again, I just spent a few hundred words sharing the thoughts inside my head. Is that boring? Oh well, as I said before, this is my story. I get to do what I want. Wow, that sounded conceited. Sorry. You catch the Canadian coming out? We're polite until we're kidnapped, then all bets are off. We were just coming up to a town, if you could even call it that. It was more like a tiny village. We came upon a small diner, parked the truck, and stepped out toward the quaint restaurant. This was so cliché. In almost every book, the plot thickens at a small diner. I was officially living in a trope. We walked in and headed toward a table near the front window. Hey Lyra, can we sit in the back? I'm not really a window seat kind of person right now, I asked. Translation: I didn't want anyone to recognize me. For all I knew, there was a whole network of people connected to my disappearance, and I wasn't going to be reckless. I just needed to get home. I needed a phone to contact the police or my brother-in-law Silas. There was a nagging feeling at the back of my head telling me I shouldn't do either, but I wasn't letting a measly intuition stop me. Who knows what that guy's deal is? I had to do the right thing. Sure, no biggie, Lyra said, pivoting toward the back of the restaurant. Once we were seated, a teenage waiter with a serious case of "I'd rather be anywhere else" came to our table. I could practically smell the lack of deodorant from across the table. Can I be the first to say you? If you didn't catch that, it's a Hilary Banks quote from The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Quality television, honestly. He dropped the menus with a smack and asked for our drinks. I ordered a chocolate milk, comfort food, don't judge, and Lyra went with a soda. As he shuffled back toward the kitchen, I leaned in. I am beginning to think this place might not pass a health inspection, I whispered, just as a small shadow skittered across the kitchen floor. Apparently, Lyra saw the rodent too. I think I have to agree with you, Elara, she said, her eyes wide. Looking down at the menu, I realized a major flaw in my plan. I didn't have any cash. What was I supposed to do? Lyra was already saving my life. I couldn't ask her to pay for my burger, too. She must have read the panic on my face. Look, Elara, it's no big deal. As long as you're not a wanted felon, I've got the bill. I've been in tough spots before, trust me. The way she said it, the tone, the look in her eyes, told me her tough spot was probably a lot more serious than a bad road trip. I didn't push for details, but I believed her. We ate our overly greasy burgers in a comfortable silence. But just as we were finishing, the jingle of the doorbell rang out. It was way too cliché. I looked up, and my heart dropped into my stomach. I knew him. He was one of the guys from the mansion. I had to get away. I looked at Lyra and frantically motioned for her to get up. I mouthed, "We have to go." Thankfully, he hadn't spotted us yet. I slipped out of the booth as quietly as possible, heading for the kitchen door. It was my only exit. Lyra dropped a 20 on the table and was right on my heels. But as the kitchen door swung open, the guy's eyes snapped toward me. "Hey, come back here," he yelled. I didn't stay to chat. I booked it. I ran through the kitchen like a gazelle, or at least a very panicked college student, ignoring the shouts from the kitchen staff. We burst out the back door and sprinted for the truck. Lyra and I dove into our seats at the same time. We locked the doors and skidded out of the parking lot, tires screaming as we made our escape. I would love to tell you that was the end of it, that we drove off into the sunset, safe and sound. But there was one simple problem. The gas light was blinking and the guy was right behind us. We had choices. We could stop for gas and get caught, or try to lose him on empty. Or there was the last choice. The one I knew I had to make. I couldn't let Lyra get dragged into this. I couldn't let her get hurt because of me. "Lyra, pull over near the sidewalk," I yelled. "Just call the police for me. Tell them where I am." And that's how I ended up jumping out of the truck and onto the pavement as Lyra sped away. There's only so much a stranger can do for a girl they found on the side of the road, and I wasn't going to ask her to do more. The headlights of the car behind us were getting closer. Chapter 6. I'm stuck in a room. I've missed Halloween. I don't have a life. But I'm not dead yet. There's that. You know your life has really dwindled into nothing when the only upside to your week is that you're not dead. I restate, I have no life. After I got caught, I was thrown into a vehicle and driven right back to the gilded cage where I started. I was thankful, though, that the guy who picked me up wasn't the terrifying, growly dude who first snatched me. It was the driver who originally brought me here. I was also thankful that I hadn't seen the Alpha since his last visit, but I had a feeling that was about to change. 2 hours later, my thoughts were confirmed. In walked the man of the hour. "Was there something that you wanted?" I snapped, curled up on the bed with my eyes closed. This is all I have basically been doing. I'm still too defeated from my last escape attempt to try again. Of course, I am still going to try again. Eventually. "Dinner is waiting downstairs. Come," he commanded. His voice had that low, vibrating quality that made the floorboards seem to hum. "What is this, Beauty and the Beast?" "You can't just order me around, Your Majesty," I replied, not moving an inch. "Well, I guess it is Beauty and the Beast," he said, his voice closer now, "because you don't get a choice." I heard the heavy thud of footsteps toward my bed. A large, warm hand wrapped around my forearm and pulled me up. I glared at him, giving him my best evil eye. You don't want to face the wrath of my evil eye. It was a specialized skill I'd spent years perfecting. He didn't seem impressed. Instead, his eyes trailed over me, and he let out a small, mocking smirk. "By the way, if this actually was the fairy tale, you would definitely be the beast," he told me. "Says the guy who basically kidnapped me," I grumbled back. I knew I looked like a mess, but he didn't have to be the one to point it out. Seemingly bored with the back and forth, he started leading me toward the door. I decided not to resist. If I could get a better look at the rest of this house, I would have a much better chance of finding a real exit. He kept his grip on my arm, and it was only then that I felt a strange tingling sensation crawling up my skin. I brushed it off as the drafty hallways. "Where are we going?" I asked as we reached a massive staircase. He started down with quick, long strides, pulling me along. "Hey, slow down. Some of us don't have legs like a giant." Surprisingly, he actually slowed his pace. It was weird. He was supposed to be the scary captor, but he was being considerate. Maybe he was just trying to lower my guard. I shouldn't have left the room so easily. Coming to the end of the stairs, we walked down another long hallway. I smelled something incredible, savory, warm, and definitely not the bread and water diet I expected. Maybe I was going to live after all. But then, he stopped. It happened faster than I could blink. He stepped into my path, his massive frame blocking the hallway and boxing me in against the wall. He didn't touch me, but he was close. I looked up at him with a gasp, my heart hammering against my ribs. He looked at me with those eyes. They were so dark they looked like charcoal. "When we go in there, I want you to be polite, act civil, and just relax." Got it. You can't just order someone to relax, Sherlock, I whispered, though my bravado was fading. He leaned down, his face hovering near mine where the air felt charged and heavy. You are just going to have to figure out how to, he murmured. The heat radiating off him was intense, and for a second, I forgot why I was mad. I felt those tingles again, and this time, I knew it wasn't the cold. Leaning away, he stepped back and regained his composure. Ladies first, he said in a husky voice, gesturing toward the dining room. I stared at him in shock for a beat before finding my feet and heading for the door. As I passed, he placed a firm hand on the small of my back, guiding me forward. What was I thinking? Why was I letting him get under my skin? I had learned during the dinner conversation that his name was Fenris. But just because I had a name didn't mean he had the right to act like he owned me. The entire meal was an exercise in frustration. When we first sat down, he kept his hand on my chair, his presence constantly looming. He tried to reach for my hand, or rest his arm behind my shoulders, and each time I subtly moved away or brushed him off. He needed to learn boundaries. I kept resisting until he started to look genuinely annoyed, and a grumpy alpha was the last thing I needed to deal with if I wanted to stay in his good graces long enough to escape. So, when he rested his arm firmly across the back of my chair, I let it stay. But that wasn't the only weird thing. There was a girl at the table, maybe my age, who looked way too excited to see me. She kept beaming at me with this blinding, creepy smile. Actually, everyone at the table kept stealing glances at me when they thought I wasn't looking. It was freaking me out. I just wanted to disappear into the upholstery. Was there something in my teeth? Or did I really look as bad as Fenris implied? This was going to be a long night. Chapter 7. During my time here, I started to get into a sort of routine. Sleep, get up, eat, sleep, shower, eat, sleep. This cycle repeated day after day. Nothing would interrupt it, and there was no danger involved, so what more could I ask for? Well, now I could ask for it to just go back to the original routine, because a certain someone was beginning to mess with my ever-so-brilliant, well-thought-out schedule. I think you all know who I am speaking of. Goes by the name Fenris, but I've more frequently been referring to him as the Predator or the Grumpy Kidnapper. It seems that he thought it would be quite interesting to start messing up my routine. Didn't all guys tend to do that? I mean, be honest, if your crush texts you just when you're about to go to bed, you are going to stay up, keep on texting for the next hour, and you are going to be exhausted the next day. Come on, just admit it, we all do it. Now, normally, I don't mind people messing with my routine. I'm a pretty laid-back person. I just had a problem with Fenris messing with it. And, for obvious reasons, I am sure you can all understand. The dude literally took me from my life, and just when I finally settle into a rhythm, he has to come in and disrupt it. Nah, this did not sit well with Elara. Did I just refer to myself in the third person? I always hate it when people do that. My mom always does that, but I have learned to put up with it. Man, why the heck did I do that? I must be losing it. Anyway, you all know he's already messed things up. Yesterday, as you may recall, the whole dinner thing, people creeping up on me with those unnerving smiles, and, well, Fenris not being able to keep his distance. Well, yeah, that. I was woken up early this morning by a maid who brought me downstairs to an office. How rich was this guy? I mean, seriously? He had multiple maids. The audacity. Why do you need someone waiting on you hand and foot? How hard is it to clean up after yourself? I didn't think it was that hard. But then again, Fenris was probably just used to being pampered. I bet his parents pay for everything. Yep, I am going with the assumption that Fenris was a freeloader who had a weird thing for bringing home girls he didn't know. I hated entitled guys like that. Unfortunately, I was wrong. Fenris came into the office while I was sitting on the couch near his desk. He came over to me, leaning in as if to offer a greeting, but I wasn't having it. I leaned back and pushed him away before he could get close. I almost felt like I shouldn't, but as I have stated before, I am not going to just play along with this guest act. The weirdest thing about it was the tiny sound that came out of his throat. It almost sounded like some sort of low growl. It was strange. Everything about this place was strange. But nevertheless, here I am, lying on the couch in what is obviously Fenris's office. I had been sitting here for hours, and I was so bored. Why the heck was I in here in the first place? No, I said in a sing-song voice. He glanced up from the screen he was concentrating on, lifting an eyebrow as if to say, "What? Can I go back to my room? I'm not doing anything here. What's even the point? I would rather sleep in peace without the prospect of someone seeing me drool as I nap." But of course, Fenris, being the brooding, annoying guy that he was, simply said no in a gruff voice. Well, that all happened a while ago. Overall, my nerves had settled, at least in his office. All the guy did was type away on his computer and talk on the phone. How was I supposed to stay intimidated if he barely paid any attention to me? Of course, the thought of that weird mark he left was still relevant, but he wasn't anywhere near me now. Thankfully, there were no creepy smiling girls, so that was an upside. Okay, well, there was the secretary, but it was much quieter today. Thank the good Lord for that. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. I watched the clock hands move slowly. I was going to start to go crazy watching the hands of the clock move across the base. Seriously, what is wrong with me? I am still watching the clock. My thoughts were cut off by the sound of a laptop slamming shut. Fenris stood up from his desk and walked briskly across the room until he was at the couch I was curled up on. I looked up at him, not really sure what to expect. I was starting to grow uncomfortable again, even though I felt those weird tingles. I had realized during my boring time lying around that the tingles only happened when he was near. But this time, he wasn't even touching me yet, and I could still feel them. Was he practicing dark magic or something? When he reached out toward my hand, I moved it away. "Whoa, dude, no touchy," I told him. He clenched his teeth, and I heard that sound again from the back of his throat. He was frustrated. "Look, I just don't want you to touch me, okay? Is that so much to ask?" And of course, Fenris, being Fenris, gave me his favorite answer. No. He didn't take my hand. He firmly took hold of my arm to lead me up from the couch. Sparks felt like they were dancing across my skin where his hand met my arm. I walked with him, hating that he was making the decisions for me. But what was I supposed to do? I was stuck here and hadn't devised a new plan of escape yet. Gah, I hated this. Let me out of here. This wasn't where I was supposed to be. That's it. I was going to do something. Not yet, but soon. Fenris thought he had total control, but he didn't know me. I have 3 brothers, for goodness sake. If I can beat my brothers at one-on-one hockey, I can handle this. He was making a huge mistake by underestimating me. Walking down the hallway, we came into a dining room where there was food laid out. This was very different from last night. Last night was casual, in the kitchen with his friends. This did not look casual at all. Sitting at the table were people who didn't look like his friends. They looked like they were related to him. Finally, it hit me like a 50-pound bag of potatoes. The predator. The grumpy kidnapper. Fenris. He was making me have dinner with his family. I had to get out of here. Chapter 8. Fenris took my hand firmly, so I couldn't pull away, and led me toward the table where a group of people sat who were undoubtedly related to him. Like, seriously. His dad looked almost exactly like Fenris, except for the gray hairs. It was actually a little eerie. Fenris was like a carbon copy. We both sat down, and honestly, I wasn't as focused on my escape plans for a second. Technically, this was working in my favor. After all, what parent would condone their son bringing a girl home like this against her will? Well, technically, he took me from a market, but still. It seemed that Fenris's family had already started dinner. Clearing his throat, Fenris's dad glanced up at us. "You're late." "There was a lot to do," Fenris replied shortly. It seemed Fenris inherited his brief vocabulary directly from his father. "Oh, come on, Bane, you were just as bad years ago. Give him a break," Fenris's mother reprimanded him. She turned back to me, a wide smile spreading across her face. "And besides, why complain when someone so important is at dinner? We don't want to give a bad first impression, do we, Bane?" I scoffed. Fenris turned toward me and glared. "What? You already gave me a pretty awful first impression," I stated. His mother looked at me, scrunching her eyebrows. Then she turned to Fenris. "What did you do?" I rolled my eyes. Hey, he marked me, then brought me here, then recaptured me. I think that's plenty of reason for a bad impression. I looked at Fenris. He clenched his jaw. Nothing. It's a part of our way. You all would have done the same. I snorted. Well, why don't you tell me what he did? The woman said, looking at me. He brought me here without asking, I said. I wasn't going to lie. This was my one chance of getting some help. I looked behind me as someone placed a plate of food in front of me. I picked up the fork and knife and cut into the steak, watching as Fenris's mother turned to him with an angry expression. You brought her here like this? What were you thinking? She said, her voice rising. Sloane, there is a tradition to uphold. She belongs with him, Bane said, trying to calm his wife. My jaw dropped. Tradition? Belongs with him? Guys, I really need better metaphors for how shocked I was. Does she even know about the pack? Sloane asked, even louder. She turned back to her husband. Don't tell me what to do, Bane. The way he went about this was wrong. Well, at least someone was on my side for once. Ugh, I looked over to see two teenage boys rolling their eyes. She's his fated mate. In our world, he has to keep her close, one said. Yeah, I mean, if I found my mate, I wouldn't let her wander off either, a girl my age added from the other side of the table. Be quiet, Sloane snapped. Her eyes were now dark and very serious. She's human. You know the rules about bringing outsiders in without their consent. He should have earned her trust first. Instead, he just took what he wanted. Not only does this make things difficult with her, but it could endanger the whole pack. This girl has a family. Did you think about the search they'll start, Fenris? I sat there, completely confused. I've heard phrases like that before, usually on Teen Wolf. But if they were serious, that didn't make any sense. Werewolves were supposed to be folklore and movies. They weren't supposed to be real. Maybe I just misheard. For all I know, I'd stumbled into some weird, intense cult. Please, I didn't do anything to deserve a cult, did I? Bane cleared his throat, looking at Sloane and then back at Fenris. He sat up straighter. Your mother has a point, Bane finally conceded. Fenris let out a strained huff of breath. So, what do you suggest I do now? The bond is already there. You could just take me home, I spoke up. Fenris looked at me with that dark, intense gaze he always had. He looked around the table at his parents. When they stayed silent, he stood up abruptly. Fine, he said, his voice echoing. If that is what everyone thinks is best, then I'll take her back. Without another word, Fenris reached out and caught my arm, pulling me up from my chair with supernatural speed. He began leading me out of the room, his grip firm as he marched toward the exit with me in tow. Chapter 9. I honestly felt like I was living in a fever dream. Maybe I was just hallucinating. I didn't even know anymore. I think I was going to go officially stir-crazy. I mean, how else would I end up in a vehicle with the guy who took me, bringing me home? I swear this must be some big hoax. For all I know, he was going to take me to the woods and leave me there. I had clearly aggravated him. He looked like he could take on a whole army. I was way too young for this drama. I am sure that Dylan O'Brien was waiting for me out there, and Fenris was ruining my chances. Now, girls, don't get all catty. Dill and I were clearly made for each other. I mean, we both have that dark hair vibe. It was meant to be. Wait, is his hair black or dark brown? I'm not really sure, but it's the principle of the thing. Anyway, back to the subject at hand. Fenris was either going to drive me home, or the tension in this car was going to explode. The engine was roaring as we traveled down the highway. I swear, if we hit a bump too hard, that would be it for both of us. Not that I'd mind Fenris losing his grip on things, but I still had a hockey game to win against Jeff Lancaster. Jeremy is a guy I've known since I was 2. We are both incredibly competitive. He won the last game, well, his team did, so I had to beat him one more time before my time was up. So, I trailed off. I didn't know what to say. Should I even be talking? Man, who knew that talking to people could be so difficult? I guess this was a special incident given the circumstances, but what was I supposed to say? Life as a reluctant guest was hard, I tell you. Fenris looked over at me. What? He said, his voice laced with frustration. I guess 2 hours on the road did nothing to calm his temper. Well, I was just wondering what the plan is. Are you actually bringing me home, or are you going to drop me in the middle of the woods where no one would ever find me? I mean, that's something I wouldn't really put past you, since you have that whole predator vibe going on. I heard Fenris let out a low growl, a sound that did not sound human at all. I was beginning to reconsider my earlier assumption. I mean, what else would make that sound? It was the only logical explanation. Okay, I was officially losing my mind. Where these crazy ideas come from, I have no idea. Oh, wait, that's right, Teen Wolf. I really needed to stop watching those shows. How many times do I have to tell you? Fenris said, his voice tight. I am not going to hurt you. Okay, buddy, no need to freak out over a simple question. I glanced over at him. I could see his knuckles going white from holding the steering wheel so tightly. Maybe I should stop talking? I did stop talking. For the next 2.5 hours, to be exact. Eventually, we pulled over to fill up the tank. We stopped at the same town where I had been caught. To think, now I was actually being brought home. It was a huge relief. Of course, there was still a chance he'd change his mind, but we pulled up to the same greasy diner where my friend and I stopped last time. Fenris climbed out first and came around to my door, but I opened it before he could. I stepped out and looked at him. Are you going to move? I asked. He was sort of caging me in. Cars on either side, the building behind me, and he was blocking the only way out. He simply crossed his arms. His sleeves were practically screaming for mercy against his biceps. And wow, those were some impressive biceps. Okay, no, we are not thinking about that. Nope, not happening. I looked back up at Fenris, and he had a small smirk on his face. Not just a smirk, a full-on, devilish, I know what you're thinking, smirk. It was slightly unnerving, but at the same time. Well, I wasn't going to admit it was attractive. If I didn't know any better, I would think that you don't want me to move, Fenris said, walking closer until there was barely any space between us. I took a step back, but he followed. He reached out and took my hand, drawing me slightly toward him. My heart was doing that annoying yapping dog thing again, sparks flying everywhere that I couldn't control. Do you really want me to move, Elara? Fenris whispered, his breath warm against my skin. My mouth parted slightly, and I was preparing to say anything to break the spell, but I didn't get the chance. The tension finally snapped, and as he leaned in, I found myself meeting him halfway. Chapter 10. My mind was in total shutdown. I don't even know how I was registering any of this, but nevertheless, the world seemed to stop as Fenris kissed me. I was frozen. I knew there was a connection there, the mate thing his family mentioned, but I wasn't ready for this. I was still holding out for my dream life with Dylan O'Brien. We were supposed to have a house and a huge family. Fenris was being very inconsiderate of my imaginary future. Okay, maybe I was a little too obsessed with my celebrity crushes. Back to the situation at hand. The kiss was sending sparks from my lips all the way down to my fingertips. I have to give him credit. I'd never felt anything like this before. It was like a physical jolt of electricity. He was a hot kidnapper, sure, but this was something else entirely, something biological. That, ladies and gentlemen, is how I ended up kissing Fenris back. I wound my arms around his neck and stood on my tiptoes. He reacted instantly, pulling me closer until there was no space left between us. His touch was possessive, his hands resting firmly on my waist, then moving to pull me even tighter against him. I let out a small gasp as the intensity flared. It felt like a battle of wills. I tried to maintain some sense of control, some distance, but the mate pull was winning. I finally stopped fighting the sensation and just let myself experience the moment. One of his hands left my side and traveled up my back, leaving a trail of tingles until his fingers tangled into my hair, holding me in place. His mouth left mine, trailing small, heated kisses along my cheek and down to my jawline. I tipped my head to the side, completely caught up in the haze. But that was a mistake. I felt the graze of sharp teeth against my skin. Right where that strange mark from before was still fading. He didn't just kiss me, he claimed me. A sharp, stinging sensation flared at my neck as he pressed his teeth against the mark, reasserting whatever hold he had on me. It was strange, possessive, and totally supernatural. I was starting to realize that being a mate meant Fenris wasn't just interested in a date. He wanted to mark me as his forever. Chapter 11. Fenris pulled back from my neck, and I was more than flabbergasted. I was angry. Like, super-duper scooper angry. What was wrong with this dude? Seriously, kissing me was one thing, but biting me? That just took it way too far. He had that unnerving, smug smirk on his face as he gazed down at me, looking far too pleased with himself. I was mad at him, but partly at myself, too. What was I thinking? Letting him get that close. Was he trying to be the Jess to my Rory? No way. Jess treated Rory way better than Fenris had ever treated me. And that's saying something. For those who don't know, that's a Gilmore Girls reference. Best show ever. But this was creepy. I could actually see a trace of redness on his teeth. Was he a vampire? Was he a ripper? Was I going to die at the hands of a vampire? I really needed to stop with the "I'm going to die" thoughts, or the universe might actually listen. But when you have a literal predator staring you down with a possessive glint in his eye, it's hard not to think about it. Now that the shock was wearing off, the anger was taking over. Dude, what the heck was that? I shouted, shoving his chest so I could scramble away from him. Do you really want to know? He asked, taking a predatory step toward me. I took a step back. Duh, you total jerk. I'd like to know why you have such a weird obsession with my neck. I watched him move his tongue across his teeth, clearing away the trace of red. He rolled his eyes. You might not actually want to know, he said, taking another step closer. Yeah, well, there are a lot of things I don't want. For example, I held up one finger. You're biting me. I don't want that. I held up another. Or you are not respecting my personal space. I kept going, finger after finger. Creepy people smiling at me, being stuck in a boring room for weeks, being taken from my home. Yeah, Fenris, there are a lot of things I don't want. But I would like to know why you're digging your teeth into my skin, because I'm pretty sure that's a health code violation. It's not a bite. It's a mark, he said, his eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made my breath hitch. Whatever, I said, rolling my eyes. At least I have healthcare to take care of it. It doesn't need a doctor. It'll heal soon enough, Fenris said, sounding annoyed. Oh yeah? And when it heals, are you just going to do it again? I crossed my arms. No, he said shortly. Well, past incidents suggest otherwise. Honestly, I'm tired of this. It hurts, in case you didn't notice. I was exasperated. Get over it, Fenris said, reaching out and catching my arm. He turned and started heading toward the restaurant with me in tow. This was becoming a very annoying habit of his. Hey, let go of me, predator, I said, trying to pry his hand off. You still haven't told me why you did it. Marked, he corrected as we walked toward the greasy diner. Potato, potato. I looked up at him as he rolled his eyes. So, are you going to tell me? Nope. Seriously? Seriously. Maybe seriously will be our always, I muttered. That makes no sense. And did you seriously just try to quote The Fault in Our Stars? He asked. I looked at him, completely surprised. Did you seriously read The Fault in Our Stars? I mean, what kind of guy reads that? It's a total tearjerker. Glancing at Fenris, I noticed a slight tinge of red touch his cheeks. That's cute. The big, bad alpha was embarrassed. Yeah, well, it was a lousy book, Fenris finally said. My mouth dropped open. How can you hate a masterpiece like that? I am not having this conversation. Come on, I'm hungry, he said, quickening his pace. At least it's not for my neck this time, I mumbled. Fenris glanced at me but didn't say a word. Just as we reached the restaurant entrance, I heard a shout from behind us. Hey, Elara. Wait up. I turned and saw Lyra jogging toward me with two guys trailing behind her. Just as I was about to pull my arm free from Fenris's grip, he led me behind his back. He let out a low, dangerous growl, muttering something under his breath. The word he used confused me. It didn't sound like something that would make a normal person that angry. But then again, Fenris wasn't exactly normal. The word that slipped past his lips was, hunters. Chapter 12. Fenris's serious demeanor was definitely not human. No one growls like that unless they're pretending to be a dog. That actually happened once when I was 16. I had worked an 18-hour day, starting at 1:30 a.m. at the markets and ending with a catering gig. There was this one guy at the event who was totally gone by 7 p.m. He was literally growling and pretending his hands were paws. It was the best catering event ever. People in that state are hilarious. They always give you a good laugh. So, maybe there was a possibility that Fenris was just acting out, but I hadn't seen him touch a drop of anything. That meant every other logical idea entering my mind was actually possible. Vampires? He certainly had a thing for my neck. But do vampires growl? Then there were werewolves. I mean, Teen Wolf is basically my personality at this point, but even Derek Hale usually restrained himself better than this. I just wanted to go home. I needed to prepare for finals, and I was missing the 4th season of Once Upon a Time. I had to know if the devilishly handsome pirate, codename Captain Hook, finally won Emma's heart. Basically, there was no normal reason why Fenris acted the way he did. Maybe he was just completely out of his mind. I just hoped he didn't have some weird ritualistic delusions. I really didn't want to be a sacrifice. I should probably get back to the situation unraveling in front of me. Fast-forwarding a bit, Lyra is standing off to the side looking uncomfortable, while the two guys who had been trailing her have their arms crossed with smug looks on their faces. I think I missed some dialogue while I was lost in my thoughts. I really should learn to pay attention, or I'm going to miss something epic. You know the deal, Valerius, the guy standing at Fenris's height said. Valerius? I thought his name was Fenris. You can't make me give her up, Fenris replied, his voice low and dangerous. Well, tough luck, you have to. It's protocol, the other one, let's call them Jack 1 and Jack 2, responded. Another growl ripped through Fenris's throat. He tightened his grip on my arm and pushed me farther behind him. I slapped his back with my free hand and tried to step out to see better, but he shoved me back. I'm not about to hand over my mate to a group of hunters, Fenris snarled. Mate? You know what? I'm not even going to question it anymore. Well, we have a permit right here. The final vote was your own father, Jack 1 said, snickering. Snicker sounds really good right now. Doesn't count. I'm the strongest in the country. The elders wouldn't mess with me, Fenris ground out. He was actually shaking now. Doesn't matter. You still have to listen, or you know what happens. Every society needs rules, Valerius. And as much as I dislike your kind, no girl deserves to be kept like this. I'm guessing she'd rather not be surrounded by a bunch of, well, mutts, Jack 2 finished. Now hand her over. We have the place surrounded. You can't win. I felt a sharp sting in my wrist. When I looked down, I saw sharp, animal-like claws protruding from Fenris's fingertips, pressing into my skin. It was like he was changing right in front of me. She's not going with scum like you, Fenris snarled. That permit isn't legit. Let me see it. The Jacks let him inspect the paper. Fenris looked at it, and then a massive, bone-chilling growl ripped through the air. He started to shake uncontrollably. Riker, quick. He's losing it. Jack 2 shouted. Glancing back, I saw a guy rush up behind Fenris with a sedative. Before I could even blink, he administered it. A couple of seconds later, Fenris's grip loosened. He wavered back and forth before crumpling to the ground. Holy fudge nuggets, what just happened? Was he unconscious? Was he okay? I looked around. The Jacks were staring at me. Lyra looked guilty. Suddenly, I was scooped up and hoisted over a large shoulder. I let out a squeak as I was lugged toward a vehicle. I was tossed into the back seat of a truck, and the Jacks and Lyra jumped in the front. We went screeching out of the parking lot. Are you kidding me right now? I was being taken away again. And of all things, the getaway truck was a Ford? They could have at least had the courtesy to use a Dodge. Chapter 13. Can I scare her a bit? Please? Flint asked, a wicked grin spreading across his face. No, Jax replied flatly. Can I at least mess with her head? It would be entertaining, Flint pushed again. No, Jax repeated. Flint, we are not here to torment her, Lyra said from the seat beside him. Well, we should put her to good use. She's already marked. There isn't much else we can do. Can I at least let the hounds loose to see how fast she runs? Flint cackled as if it were the funniest joke in the world. Seriously? First, I deal with a strange obsession. Now I'm stuck with a guy who wants to turn my life into a horror movie. I just could not catch a break. Why couldn't Styles just drive up in his ratty old Jeep and save me? He was supposed to be my hero. At the moment, for a really strange reason, I almost wished that Fenris were here. Because at least he didn't talk about getting rid of me as a hobby. Your sense of humor is exhausting, Flint, Lyra snapped. Flint glanced back at me and let out another snicker. Oh, come on, Lyra, I was just trying to rattle her, he said nonchalantly. Seriously, Flint, if you don't shut up, I'm going to leave you on the side of the road, Jax growled from the driver's seat. Flint rolled his eyes. Geez, don't get your spirits in a bunch. I was just kidding. Can't take a joke, I see. Think of what she's already been through. Alphas are the worst. You and I both know that, Lyra reprimanded him. She didn't look too upset when they were together earlier, but hey, that's just my opinion, Flint replied, holding his hands up in surrender. Seriously though, I didn't want that kiss. Okay, maybe I wanted it a little. I mean, how can you not when a guy has muscles like that? But wait, should I be worried about him? I mean, he was lying crumpled on the ground when we left. Now that I think about it, I feel a little guilty. But then again, what else are you supposed to think about when the person in the front seat won't stop talking about how they'd like to handle you? Fenris was still the one who took me. I shouldn't be worried about him, period. But there was still a nagging feeling at the back of my head. Ugh, this whole thing was giving me the heebie-jeebies. It was purely the bond, Lyra snapped at Flint. A connection she can't control yet. Flint rolled his eyes again. Doesn't change the fact that they were completely focused on each other. Plus, you resisted your pull. You fought your way out of your own situation, for goodness sake. Police, Fenris, and I were not that intense. Being that intense would be like Thor and Jane Foster's first kiss. It literally looks like two vacuums attacking each other. Worst movie kiss ever. Wait, Lyra fought her way out of a situation like this? I looked over at her. She looked like she was ready to give Flint a piece of her mind. Personally, I think a well-placed kick does much more damage. Would you guys both shut up? Jax's voice was irate. How about we get some coffee? That way, both of your mouths will be occupied for at least 15 minutes. We had entered a small town about 5 minutes ago. I was distracted. Maybe I could get out of this? I was sure someone would help me once we got to the coffee shop. Jax caught my eye in the rearview mirror. And Elara, if you try anything, I'll let Flint deal with you in whatever way he's dreaming up. Understood. He gave me a look so intense I knew it wasn't a bluff. Flint just generally freaked me out. I nodded quickly. So, what do you all want? Jax asked. Flint and Lyra listed their orders. Thankfully, Jax asked if I wanted anything too. I have a slight addiction. It's almost as bad as Lorelai and Rory's. I don't know how I've lasted this long without a caffeine fix. After the coffee stop, we kept driving farther north. As the hours passed, the sky grew darker. We were heading deep into the wooded areas. Flint's comments continued, and Lyra's scolding followed suit. We pulled onto a gravel road, turning off the main highway. As we went deeper, Jax started to look frustrated. Just as the truck was doing a 180 to head back toward the main road, something massive came charging out of the forest. It crashed into the side of the truck, its claws screeching as they trailed down the glass. It looked like a huge, distorted beast, but it wasn't the look of the creature that scared me the most, it was the look in its eye. It stared at me with a crazed, completely wild hunger. Then, the truck was jolted and jerked as more of the creatures jumped at the vehicle. I was now officially and completely in trouble. Chapter 14. Holy fudge cakes, I was a goner. Like a character in a tragic season finale, I was going to die. That was a total drama queen thought, I know. But a beast was staring at me through the window. It had backed away from the truck, but continued to glare at me like a nightmare come to life. Whatever the heck it was. I let out a yelp, a very girly one at that, when I heard a crash and then a feral growl on the other side of the truck. A beast, just like the first one, clawed at the Ford's metal, peeling it away like it was aluminum foil. Then I looked out the front as another beast was literally punching the windshield. Another was clawing at the driver's side door. They were everywhere. Do you see why I'm freaking out? This is like when your best friend spoils that a major character has a secret wife right as you start the first season of a show. You're not supposed to tell me that. I want to enjoy the McDreamy vibes for at least one season before everything goes to pieces. Okay, maybe this was slightly worse than a TV spoiler. Who am I kidding? This can't be compared to any movie. These things aren't normal, Jax. Nothing is stopping them. Flint yelled. Jax looked nervous. Flint looked nervous. Lyra looked nervous. And everyone in this truck, excluding me, seemed the type to never get nervous. They were usually like Tony Stark, cocky and arrogant. Well, Flint was anyway. But none of them ever really looked this rattled. Can't you just drive, Jax? They are peeling this truck apart. We need to get out of here. In case you haven't noticed, the truck is dead, and it won't start up, idiot, Flint snapped at Lyra. So they were werewolves. Wait, did I kiss a werewolf? Oh my goodness. Does that even count as being human anymore? I never thought I'd be involved in a supernatural love triangle. But anyway, I could freak out about the logistics of dating a wolf later. If I had a later. Again and again, the beasts attacked. It was weird they hadn't gotten in yet. They'd been at it for 5 minutes. You'd think they would have broken through a ford by now, but Lyra mentioned the truck had extra armor. I might have questioned why they needed a tank for a getaway car, but with these things attacking, it was clear enough. Get the gear out. Whatever we have, we're going to need it, Jax ordered. Lyra jumped into the back with me and motioned for me to crouch up. She lifted the seat cushion and pulled out various supplies, passing them to the front. After she gave the boys what they needed, she handed me something for protection. Sitting down beside me, she spoke with total intensity. Just use it. Don't think. If they get to you, it's over. These things aren't looking for friends. Aim true. You have to make it count on the first try. I'm not kidding, Elara. If you want to see tomorrow, you have to protect yourself. Gulping, I held the device in my hand, my finger hovering near the trigger. Then the real chaos started. The beasts were getting in. Everyone was busy, but they weren't keeping the tide back. To be honest, it was all a blur. I could hardly process what was happening. Suddenly, the first beast I'd seen clawed at the window, scratching slowly until the glass gave way. There was nothing separating us. It lunged, its claws reaching for me. Now, Elara. I vaguely heard Lyra scream. I did what instinct told me. What anyone would do in a high-stress situation. I pulled the trigger. The shot whizzed out and hit the beast right smack dab between its eyes. Chapter 15. I saw the shot sink into the skin of the beast in front of me. Or shall I say, werewolf? Yeah, I was still coming to terms with that one. Who would have thought werewolves actually existed? I mean, I just defended myself against a literal werewolf. And strangely, I wasn't freaking out as much as I should have been. Maybe all that Teen Wolf actually prepared me for this. Or maybe I just didn't have time to process the sheer absurdity of it all. I think I should be losing my mind right now. I'll just wait until this scene is over to start my proper breakdown. If we actually survive this, I am going to blow my top at someone for leaving out this ever-so-vital detail. I was going to go total Rachel Berry on them. You have not seen me truly upset yet. I'd be on Lyra like Scott McCall on a mission, only way less romantic and way more. I am going to talk your ear off until you apologize. Anyway, back to the part where I took the shot. The werewolf shook its head, its eyes locking back on mine with a wickedly evil grin. This wasn't a charming villain smirk, it was 10 times creepier. Its hand reached up, claws digging into the back of its own head until it pulled out the silver bullet. It held it between a thumb and forefinger, twirling it mockingly before dropping it to the ground. It spat toward me in total defiance. Gulping hard, I just sat there, waiting. Suddenly, the beast lunged, its large claws catching the collar of my jacket and hauling me toward the truck window. I have to say, it's impressive that I fit through such a small space. I should join one of those magic acts where girls fit into tiny boxes. I'd be a natural. But even though my newfound flexibility was cool, I couldn't ignore the fact that the beast now had me by the neck outside the truck. I couldn't breathe. Jax. I heard someone yell from inside. But that was all I could register. The air was being cut off, and black dots were starting to dance in my vision. Just as I was about to black out, the beast suddenly released me and slumped to the ground, going completely limp. I hit the dirt, gasping and trying to pull in air as quickly as possible. I was in a daze until Lyra started shaking me, pulling me back to reality. I watched the guys get out of the truck, following her but staying close. "Are you okay?" she asked. Was I okay? Really? I was just handled like a rag doll by a monster, and she's asking if I'm okay? That's like asking a villain if they want a sequel. Obviously they do, but it's still a ridiculous question given the current chaos. I was about to answer when rustling in the woods stopped me. Branches cracked, leaves crunched, and then a man, practically vibrating with power, stepped into the light. I was just going to assume he was the alpha of all alphas. Flint, Jax, and Lyra looked ready to attack. "Nice little trick I played there, eh?" the man said with a sickening smirk. With a snap of his fingers, the limp beasts were back on their feet, growling and looking ready to eat us alive. Holy fudge, holy freaking fudge. They looked at us with beady, wild eyes. "Who the hell are you?" Jax demanded, taking a step forward. To be honest, he reminded me of Peter Hale from Season 1, only way more intense. I thought you'd never ask," the man said, walking closer until he was only a few feet away. "I am Valerius. In case you haven't brushed up on your history, I'm the one who practically invented your world." He looked around at our blank stares and rolled his eyes. "I have to spell it out? Fine. I am the first of our kind. The original." "Seriously, dude, who are you?" Flint deadpanned. "Don't believe me?" Valerius laughed. He pulled back his collar to reveal a mark. An upside-down cross with a crescent moon right over his heart. Jax paled instantly. "What do you want?" Jax asked, his voice actually quivering. "Oh, nothing. Just giving you a heads up." Valerius paced in a circle around us. "You see these animals? There are millions of them. I control them. I can bring them back whenever I fancy. So I'd watch your back. Nothing you have can defeat what's coming." Then Valerius stopped in front of me, running a finger down my cheek in a way that made my skin crawl. Normally, I'd go all ninja chicken on him and slap his hand away, but with a dozen monsters standing by, I wasn't about to test him. "And for you, dear girl, good luck with that mate of yours. He's a real keeper." "Well, anyone related to me is," he cackled. He took a step back. "I have business to attend to. Until next time." He vanished into the woods, the beasts following him. We all just stood there. Jax looked like he'd seen a ghost. I was freaking out inside. How did I go from a Saturday market to being caught in the middle of a war between the first werewolf and his descendants? Valerius was a psycho. Fenris was, well, complicated. The relation was becoming clear. Just as I wondered how Fenris was doing, he stumbled out of the woods. His clothes were tattered, his arms were cut up, and he was covered in blood. He wavered for a second, then his eyes found mine. Without a word, he lunged forward, tackling me into a massive, crushing hug. We crashed to the ground together, and the second we hit the dirt, Fenris went out cold. Chapter 16. I was in a cage. Well, okay, maybe it wasn't a literal cage, but it was one of those observation rooms where they take you for questioning. Except there were no tables or chairs. It was just me, sitting in the corner, and the alpha formerly known as Fenris lying face down in the middle of the room. This strangely reminded me of one of those sci-fi labs where people are studied under a microscope. There was one of those two-way mirrors that I couldn't see through, but I'm just going to assume there were scientists on the other side taking notes. It was incredibly annoying. Mostly because I had this massive, awkward itch right under my shoulder blade that I couldn't reach, and I was convinced a dozen people were watching me from the other side of the glass. How was I supposed to fix this with some dignity intact? At least I didn't have to worry about Fenris. He was passed out cold. Okay, maybe I should be worrying about him. I did my part. I checked his pulse and did what any helpful person would do. Actually, I'm pretty sure any normal human being would check if he was still breathing. They probably just wouldn't be internally debating whether or not they could get away with an awkward stretch while being examined. I was a free spirit. You could call me Miley Cyrus, though without the professional dancing skills or the record-breaking hits. I still have some semblance of self-control, a great relationship with my parents, and zero ability to dance. But I was a free spirit. Nobody could keep me constrained. Wait. Okay, maybe that's a slight exaggeration considering I'm currently in a locked room. To be honest, I was a tiny bit worried about Fenris. He hadn't moved an inch since we got here. There was this nagging in the back of my brain telling me I should help him, but the other half of me was still pretty annoyed that he'd gotten me into this mess. My brain was clearly short-circuiting from the stress. I was jerked out of my thoughts when a loud groan erupted from Fenris. He sounded like a frustrated rhino. Should I help him? Decisions. It seems like I've had an abundance of them lately, yet at the same time, I've had zero choice in the big stuff. I didn't decide to be part of a werewolf war, but here I am, making choices about shooting monsters and checking on my grumpy captor. My life is just a series of very weird plot twists. I heard another groan and looked at Fenris. He lifted his head and looked me straight in the eye. "Come here," he said, his voice raspy and thin. I looked at him warily, staying exactly where I was. Fenris flinched, trying to sit up. "Come here," he said again. When I shook my head, refusing for the second time, Fenris took matters into his own hands. He started pulling himself toward me using one arm, dragging his body across the floor. My eyes widened. I could tell he was in pain. The grimace on his face and the clenching of his jaw made that very clear. A few seconds later, Fenris had pulled himself right up beside me. He reached out, his arm wrapping around my waist as he leaned his weight against me. I was about to move, to scramble away, but the words that tumbled out of his mouth stopped me cold. "Please," he said in a quiet, broken voice. I looked up at him. His head was leaning back against the wall, his eyes closed. "Please, just for tonight." I watched as he swallowed hard, a single tear slipping past his eyelid and trickling down his cheek as he held on to me like I was the only thing keeping him grounded. Chapter 17. Wakey, wakey. An ever so annoying voice sounded from across the room. Oh joy, back to reality. I looked up as Flint walked in. Was it bad that I immediately associated Flint with the idea of a villain in a cartoon? He just had that "I'm here to ruin your day" energy. I felt Fenris stiffen against me. We were still in the same position we'd fallen into last night, Fenris with his arm around my waist, my head on his chest. I wasn't going to say it was a magical moment, mostly because, let's be real, we both smelled like we'd been through a supernatural war zone and then some. It was not a perfume commercial kind of morning. I sent a glare toward Flint as he gave us a look that I assume was supposed to be charming, but it came off more like a villain from a slasher flick. "Come on, get up. We've got things to do," Flint said, clapping his hands together. I just sat there and watched while Fenris struggled to climb up from the floor. He didn't look great, but he looked better than yesterday. He kind of resembled Stefan Salvatore from Season 1 of The Vampire Diaries when he was fighting his darker instincts. Apparently, I was taking too long, because Flint strode over and grabbed me by the arm, hauling me to my feet. "Come on, let's get moving," Flint said, dragging me toward the door. A deep, bone-chilling growl erupted from behind me. Yep. Fenris was definitely a werewolf. He lunged forward, grabbing my other arm and pulling me back to his side. I hadn't realized he could move that fast, given he was just struggling to stand, but I was glad he did. To be honest, I felt much safer with the guy who had a biting habit than I did with Flint. Fenris hadn't threatened to get rid of me yet. Flint had practically been making a wish list of ways to do it. It was like choosing between two villains in Once Upon a Time. Personally, I'd rather choose Dylan O'Brien, but since he wasn't an option, I was stuck with the grumpy alpha. "One day, dearie," I whispered to myself, "one day we'll be together." Yes, I just used a Rumpelstiltskin quote to talk about my celebrity crush. I am officially the master of all fandoms. Fenris let out another massive growl, looking ready to lunge at Flint. I must have missed some dialogue while I was lost in my own head. My thoughts really do impair my logic sometimes. Jax came running down the hall and stood beside Flint. I thought I told you not to piss him off, Jax grumbled. Flint rolled his eyes, his favorite hobby. Please, we have the upper hand here. Jax let out a long sigh. Just get them to the room. I don't want Fenris turning. We both know that's a recipe for disaster. He turned and walked back the way he came, muttering to himself. Well, you heard the man, Flint said. Let's go. He motioned for us to lead the way. Fenris didn't budge. Do you really think I'm just going to walk into whatever trap you've set? I may be weak right now, but I'm not an idiot. I let out a snort. I mean, we have to admit he's not exactly the brightest bulb in the box. He's more like one of those old-school light bulbs that flicker every 3 seconds and sucks up way too much energy. Flint pulled out his piece, twirling it with an arrogant smirk. Do you really want me to make you? I'm sure you're not fond of the silver in here. Move, or you're not leaving this room. I looked at Fenris as his jaw tightened. To my utter surprise, he actually started moving. He walked past Flint and down the hall, keeping a firm grip on me. That's right, keep moving, Flint taunted. I'd shut my mouth if I were you, Flint. I heard Lyra yell from further down the hall. We entered a room filled with a huge table, maps, books, and pens sprawled everywhere. Fenris and I stopped at the entrance. Take a seat, guys, Jax said, motioning toward 2 wooden chairs. Surprisingly, Fenris obliged, pulling me into the chair beside him. I thought he was going to go completely ballistic, but he seemed to be waiting. Jax sat across from us, pacing for a second before running his hands through his hair. Flint stayed standing, watching us like a hawk. He was seriously creeping me out. Jax leveled us with a look that was even more serious than a Stefan Salvatore stare. As much as this pains me. And trust me, it does, I have to ask a favor. There is something bad coming. Something really bad. And we need to stop it. He looked directly at Fenris, then at me. We need your help. Chapter 18. We were all sitting around one big table. They had actually convinced Fenris to sit down and talk, although I think he just got tired of their begging. Honestly, it was a little strange. I felt like Fenris, and I should be the one begging, since we were technically the ones being held here. But it seemed to be the other way around. Fenris definitely had the upper hand. We've been doing our research, and it seems your grandfather has quite the lineage, Jax said, pointing toward the name Valerius on the sheet spread across the table. Lines connected names, places, and years, half of it looked like Latin. But hey, I barely passed high school French, so don't quote me on that. He was the king of Arcadia, a kingdom of wooded land inhabited mostly by animals. It wasn't exactly lavish, but it was full of power and dictatorship. Valerius believed only the strongest survived, Lyra explained, expanding on Jax's words. Yeah, you wouldn't have lasted a day, Fenris, Flint said, rolling his eyes. Fenris raised an eyebrow at him, but Flint was already back to playing with his dagger. Arcadia? Valerius was a king. I asked. Oh, please. Would you just let us explain without interrupting, newbie? Flint snapped. Fenris let out a low growl. Flint, what did I say? Jax reprimanded his brother. I nudged Fenris's shoulder. Whoa, Tiger, no need to go all wolfy. So not called for. Now, is someone going to answer my question? Please. Fenris glanced at me. Elara, we're talking about the celestial world here. The old stories. He looked back at Jax. Can you just get on with this? I have things to do. I don't have time for your problems. These aren't exactly small problems, Fenris, Jax replied. Well, why don't you get on with the story so we can actually do something about it? Fenris ground out. Great, the big bad wolf was angry. Again. Look, you know the legend, how Valerius tested the gods and was turned into the first werewolf as a punishment? Jax asked. Of course I know my own history, Hunter, Fenris growled. Wait, Valerius was the first? And I'm sitting next to his grandson. I shifted slightly away from Fenris. There are vital details you're missing, Jax continued. The moon goddess, Artemis, was actually in tune with Valerius's kingdom. Legend says she felt pity for him despite his curse. She gave his lineage a hidden power, one that has been dormant until now. Wait a minute. Those creatures outside, is that the power? I asked, shuddering. He has the power over the fallen werewolves. The ones who didn't find peace. In the old texts, they're called Thanatos, the Greek word for death. So basically, we're dealing with an army of zombie werewolves, Flint said nonchalantly, throwing a dagger at a dartboard across the room and hitting the bullseye. I wasn't ready for a zombie apocalypse. Not at all. I still had to build my underground bunker and stock it with supplies. This was almost as outrageous as not being able to find a decent coat at Forever 21 because the sizing is so messed up. Am I the only one who deals with that? I'm not even that big, but I swear, those stores are designed for people who don't breathe. There are millions of them potentially, Flint added. When a werewolf falls, if they weren't laid to rest properly, burned or neutralized, they remain tied to this world. Valerius now has the power to command them. He can get them to do whatever he wants. The only way to stop them now is total neutralization. But it's nearly impossible, Lyra added. When they transition to a Thanato, they become incredibly strong and difficult to defeat. We don't have the resources or the numbers to handle an army of them. And what does this have to do with me? Fenris sneered. I'm an alpha. He's not going to touch my kind. Valerius is coming after the ones he considers weak. Like you. He pointed a finger at everyone around the table. We need your help, Jax said, his voice grave. No. Now, Elara and I are leaving, Fenris said firmly. The area is surrounded by my people. If you try to stop us, I will show you exactly what an alpha is capable of. You won't like the result. Fenris stood up, grabbed my hand, and pulled me out of my seat. He led me out of the room and straight toward the front door. He'd better be bringing me home now. The tug-of-war routine was getting really old. Chapter 19. What the heck was that, Fenris? I demanded, pulling my hand out of his grasp as we exited the house. He didn't answer, just kept moving toward the truck waiting in the driveway. Who did he think he was? I mean, sure, if he were Dylan O'Brien or Theo James, I might not have a problem with being led around. But this was Fenris. And it seemed his full-time job was dragging me across the countryside. Wait, did I just say countryside? Yikes, I sound like a city kid. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I'd have a headache the size of Dwayne Johnson's muscles if I lived in a city. Maybe I was just trying to be poetic, in a totally non-poetic way. Just ignore me, I'm making no sense. Seriously, dude, I'm not some doll you can just drag around. I know I'm fantabulous and all, but I like to keep my personal space, you know. Personal, I said, my voice climbing an octave. Of course, Fenris, being his usual alpha self, ignored me. He walked to the passenger door, and before I could protest, he placed his hands on my waist and hoisted me into the seat. Whoa, totally not called for. I'm not that short. I can climb into a truck on my own. For your information, I said, sarcasm dripping from every word. At the moment, I don't trust you to stay put, he said shortly. He slammed the door and walked around to the driver's side. As soon as he climbed in, I started in on him again. How have I been untrustworthy? Seriously, what have I done? I crossed my arms, pinning him with my best glare. Fenris let out a long sigh as he pulled out of the driveway. Well, no, the answer is no. I have done nothing wrong. I cut him off. You ran away, he pointed out. Oh, come on, I thought we were over that. The slate isn't exactly clean, Elara, he said, craning his neck to check the road before turning. Really? I think you need to clean the slate. Your list is way longer than mine. You marked me. I ticked off a finger. It's a bond, he corrected. You brought me here without asking. I ticked off a second finger. Necessary for your safety, he countered. And then, of all things, you kissed me. I said, my voice rising. A kiss you didn't exactly protest, he pointed out, a small, annoying smirk playing on his lips. Police, you didn't even give me the spark everyone talks about, I lied, trying to sound irritated. And there is so much more. You marked me again after that kiss? Then I find out you're a literal werewolf? How is that even a thing? I mean, the least you could have done was give me a heads up. Hey, Elara, I'm actually a supernatural creature that ignores personal boundaries. That would have been nice. And then you let me stay near you when you smelled like. Before I could finish my sentence, Fenris pulled the truck onto the shoulder and killed the engine. In a blur of motion, the space between us vanished. Before I could process the move, he had closed the distance, his lips meeting mine to effectively shut me up. And to top it all off, the alpha still smelled like he'd been through a war zone. Chapter 20. His lips were on mine, and for a second, the rest of the world just vanished. It was distracting, intense, and generally amazing. Like Robert Downey Jr. levels of amazing. Is it weird that I was thinking about celebrities while being kissed? My brain is a crowded place, okay? Even in the middle of a world-shifting kiss, I still have coherent thoughts. You guys probably want the details, don't you? I see you. The intensity was growing, and I could feel the sheer power Fenris was holding back. His hands were on my waist, pulling me closer as if he were afraid I'd disappear. I didn't really get the appeal. I'm just a normal girl with love handles and the occasional breakout. Seriously, how does my brain go from a romantic moment to thinking about my skincare routine? It's a talent, really. But back to the point. Fenris didn't really know me. We mostly just spazzed out at each other or dealt with supernatural threats. He wasn't telling me anything important, like being a werewolf, until we were literally being attacked by an army of them. The tension in the truck was skyrocketing. I was sitting close to him, my hands moving to tangle in his dark hair. The sparks people talk about? They weren't just sparks anymore. They were a full-on electric current traveling all the way down to my toes. That had never happened before. Fenris let out a low, vibrating growl as the connection deepened. His hands moved with a new ferocity, and for a second, I saw his eyes flash a brilliant, predatory yellow. Something in him had snapped. The wolf was taking over. He moved closer, his strength becoming overwhelming. I felt the seats shift as the space between us disappeared entirely. His kisses moved to my neck, more possessive than before, his teeth grazing the mark he'd given me. Suddenly, the haze started to clear for me. The intensity was becoming too much, too fast. "Fenris," I said, my voice slightly breathless. He didn't seem to hear me. "Fenris, wait. Stop." I tried to push at his shoulders, a sudden wave of panic hitting me as I realized he wasn't really there. It was like he was lost in some predatory trance. "Fenris, please stop," I said louder, my voice cracking. That did it. It was like a bucket of ice water had been thrown over him. His eyes cleared instantly, shifting from that wild yellow back to their usual dark hue. He scrambled back to his side of the truck, his chest heaving, a look of pure, unadulterated horror on his face. "Oh God, Elara," he whispered, his hands shaking as he reached out toward me before quickly pulling them back. "I am so sorry. I lost control. The wolf. I didn't mean to." I scrambled back against the passenger door, clutching my jacket shut, tears finally stinging my eyes. The fear was still there, buzzing under my skin. "Just stay away from me," I choked out, wiping a stray tear from my cheek. The silence in the truck was deafening, broken only by our ragged breathing. The progress we had made felt like it had just shattered into a million pieces. Chapter 21. There are moments in your life that you'll never forget, the beautiful, the horrid, the utterly unique. All of these things serve a purpose in making you who you are at this moment. Fortunately for me, the only truly horrid thing I'd experienced before this was failing my chemistry exam. Most of my life had been happy. I had a strong family, good friends, and a relatively normal existence. I never really experienced true fear until these past few weeks. I felt like I was the bullseye of a dartboard, and everyone had the greatest luck hitting right there, the small dot in the middle of the chaos. Me. Maybe I was over-exaggerating. Compared to some people in the world, I still had it okay. But everyone thinks their pain is the loudest, because no one else can truly feel what you're feeling. Yikes, since when did I get so deep? But seriously, what happened with Fenris had a massive impact on me. Not because it was the worst thing to ever happen in the world, but because it was the worst thing to ever happen to me. Things didn't go all the way in the truck, but they could have. In every part of this weird relationship we had, I felt like I had some scrap of control. I felt like I could stop things if I really meant to. But that moment in the car? There was no control. I was powerless. Being powerless is the most terrifying thing in the world. It means your safety is up to someone else, and if that someone else loses control, you're in trouble. I was sitting in the same bed I'd been in just a few weeks earlier. Sitting and waiting. Waiting for something, or nothing. My life had dwindled down to a series of empty moments. I'd been lying to myself, distracting my brain with mundane things and TV show references to stay connected to my past life. But the truth was, Styles wasn't going to ride up in his beat-up Jeep. Stefan Salvatore wasn't coming to save the day, and Captain Hook wasn't going to sweep me off my feet. They were just figments of my imagination that kept me from facing a bleak reality. Fenris walked into the room, and I stared blankly at him. He clenched his jaw, walking across the room in heavy strides. He pulled a chair to the side of the bed and sat down, resting his elbows on his knees. "What do you want to know?" he asked. His deep voice seemed to vibrate through the floor. "Everything." "Just tell me everything," I said, lying on my side and facing away from him. "I'm a werewolf." "Got that part," I replied, my voice sharp with sarcasm. "You're my mate. My soulmate, to be exact." He let out a long sigh. "You know, you don't have to pause after every word," I snapped. "You're my other half, Elara. I'm not complete without you." "That's just illogical," I commented. "People need to discover who they are on their own." "How are you supposed to do that if you're incomplete until you find someone else? It makes your whole existence rely on another person." "I want to be complete on my own." I heard him shift, and then I felt a hand on my shoulder. "Don't touch me," I growled. He retracted his hand instantly. "Elara." "What?" Are the words stuck? Is your brain really that slow? I was biting now, letting the anger out. I can't let you go back," he said. He actually sounded sad about it, which only made me angrier. "Is there anything else?" I asked, ignoring his statement. "Being my mate makes me protective of you, but it also makes it harder for me to maintain my human logic around you. When I'm close to you, my instincts take over. Everything is heightened tenfold. It's hard to stop. Is this your lame way of excusing what happened?" I turned to face him, a glare firmly in place. "How can you say you didn't register it? I was literally asking you to stop." I struggled. "I did everything possible to get through to you." Tears started to trickle down my face. "I stopped though, Elara." "I stopped," he said, looking at me with a sorrowful, desperate expression. "It doesn't matter. Any trust one had in you is gone, Fenris. And it isn't coming back." My voice was firm, even with the tears. "Elara, I love you." "Please," he trailed off. "If you really loved me, you'd take me home." Chapter 22. "You know I never meant to hurt you, Elara," Fenris said as we drove down the road, finally nearing my house. I snorted. He sighed. After a few moments of heavy silence, Fenris spoke again. "If there is anything I want you to know, it's that I love you. Just remember that." I snorted again. He sighed even louder. "Elara." "What?" I asked, my voice sharp. "Please, would you just listen to me?" "Why?" "Because I love you." "No, you don't." "You have no idea how much I care about you, Elara," Fenris said, his voice thick with frustration. "But that's the thing, Fenris. You don't love me. You can't build love on a foundation like this. It's not healthy. Love is about trust, faithfulness, and believing in someone. It's about fighting through the hard times because you choose to, not because you're forced to. What we have, it isn't that." I finished my rant with a huff, trying to catch my breath. He wasn't in love with me. Sure, there was this unworldly, magnetic attraction pulling us together, but attraction doesn't equal love. "You're wrong," Fenris replied quietly. "Would you just stop? You know this isn't how it's supposed to be. There have been red flags every step of the way, Fenris. I've noticed them, and I know you have too. You just haven't accepted them yet." I crossed my arms and glared out the windshield. "Stop it. Just please stop." Fenris exclaimed, pulling the truck abruptly to the side of the gravel road. He ran his hands through his hair, covering his face in a moment of pure frustration. "Fenris," I started, my tone exasperated. You have to let me go, okay?" He looked at me, his eyes full of a desperate intensity. That's the thing, Elara. I can't. It feels physically impossible. For you, maybe it's easy to walk away. You can move on. I can't. I edged closer to the door, my heart hammering. You are ingrained in my soul. It's the bond, the moon goddess. Do you know how hard it is for me to stay away from you? Do you know how much it's going to hurt to watch you walk into that house and be away from me? I don't appreciate you discounting what I feel. My love might not look like your definition, but it is real to me. And I'm not going to just forget you. In the day, I'll see you in everything I do. In the night, you'll be in every dream. You want me to let go? I don't think I'll ever be able to do that. He turned the truck back onto the road, driving over the familiar hills that led to my home. He pulled into my driveway and parked right in front of the porch. You wanted to come home? Well, here you are. You're home. But don't ask me to stop feeling what I feel. Because when I care about someone, it's forever. And I care about you. Chapter 23. I thought things would be better once I got home. It was nearly Christmas. I felt like my life was on a giant pause button and someone was holding their finger there. Ever since Fenris entered my world, everything else had just stopped. All I've been trying to do is stay busy with my courses. My professors gave me some leeway, but missing a month of class is hard to overcome. I'm pretty sure I bombed the first few tests, despite all the late-night studying. Sleep hasn't been coming easily either. The doctors wrote it off as a reaction to the extreme stress I'd been under, but it meant I was exhausted all the time, making it even harder to take in information. I only had one exam left to finish. Honestly, I wasn't sure what I'd do once it was over, and I was left alone with my thoughts. I looked down at my borrowed notes and sighed. Life just felt heavy. A knock on the door startled me. My brother, Connell, was standing in the archway. Your last exam is this afternoon, right? He asked. Yeah. He sat at the edge of my bed. I propose we go Christmas shopping. Get you out of this apartment. Spend some time together, like old times. Ever since I got back, Connell had been trying everything to get me out. He thought I was secluding myself too much. I used to be a social butterfly. Now I was the exact opposite, holed up and studying just to avoid thinking about him. Fine, I finally agreed. Great. I'll pick you up after your exam, he said, heading out the door. I sat in the student lounge later that day. Exams were done. I wasn't sure if I'd passed, but at least they were over. I watched the big, sloppy snowflakes drop from the sky until a white Honda pulled up. I grabbed my bag and rushed out, hitting the harsh December wind. Hey, I said, jumping into the car. Done, eh? Connell asked. Yeah. Hopefully we don't get an ice storm like last year. That was way too cold for me. No kidding, Connell chuckled. By the third day of that blackout, I couldn't feel my toes. I thought they were going to fall off. You, Connell. I didn't need the mental image of your frozen feet, I replied, rolling my eyes. The rest of the ride was a comfortable silence. When we got to the mall, it was packed, not a surprise for a week before Christmas. We started at American Eagle because Connell needed new jeans. I was waiting near the changing rooms to give him a second opinion. I was staring at my phone when I sensed someone standing there. I looked up and my heart nearly stopped. My eyes widened. What on earth are you doing here, Fenris? His brow scrunched in mock confusion. Buying clothes, he held up a few shirts. What else? What are you doing here? He asked, a small smirk playing on his lips. Christmas shopping, I replied in a clipped tone. Why don't you get back to your shopping? I was just about to leave. I think I'd much rather stand here and talk to you. He leaned against the wall, looking far too comfortable. Hey Elara, how do these look? Connell asked, stepping out of the changing room. I glanced over. Too short. I'll find you a longer pair, I said, dismissing him and walking right past Fenris toward the denim racks. I started searching through the sizes, trying to keep my hands from shaking. You know, you and I should go get some coffee, a voice said right in my ear. I let out a startled gasp, clutching my chest. He was way too stealthy. I'd rather not, I replied, standing up with the jeans. I turned around to find him standing way too close for social politeness. Shoving past him, I headed back to the changing rooms. Who's the guy? Fenris asked, following me. None of your business. Connell, here are your jeans, I said, handing them through the door. Thanks, Elara. I'm going to look at the discount racks. I'll be back, I told Connell. I walked out and ignored Fenris, shuffling through the clothes on the nearby racks. I like that dress. You should get it, Fenris said, appearing beside me again and gesturing to a floral dress. It's way too cold for that, I replied flatly. I turned to face him. What are you really doing here, Fenris? He pursed his lips. I'm here for you. I snorted. You're not bringing me back to that house. I'm not here to take you anywhere you don't want to go. I rolled my eyes. Well, that's a change. So what's the plan? Are you just going to follow me through the mall all day? I don't know. Do you want to go for coffee? I glared at him. Seriously? Not happening. I spun on my heel and walked back toward Connell, leaving him behind. When I glanced back, he still had that self-satisfied smirk on his face. Chapter 24. What do you think of the Tim Hortons Christmas cup? Connell asked, inspecting the coffee in his hand. Personally, I liked the old design better. I think the new ones look cool. We've had the old ones for years, I replied. I stuck my key into the lock and let the apartment door swing open. Older is better, though, Connell insisted, shrugging off his coat. Well, not always, I countered. I mean, think about old technology. Or awkward first dates with people who still use flip phones. New is fine, Connell. Fair point, he conceded with a shrug. I let out a sigh as I threw my jacket onto the back of the couch, dropping the shopping bags onto the coffee table. So, what shall it be? Comedy or action? My brother asked as he entered the room. I looked at the clock. It was 9:59 p.m. I wanted to go to bed, but I knew the moment my head hit the pillow, my brain would start spinning. Staying up was the only way to stay sane. I looked back at the clock, 10 p.m. Comedy, I said, grabbing the blanket from the couch. How I Met Your Mother it is. I woke up with a start. 10:14 a.m. Waking up with a stuffy nose and a massive headache was not on my Christmas wish list. A shirtless Francisco Lachowski? Yes. A seasonal cold? No. I rubbed the sore muscle in my neck. Sleeping on a couch is a one-way ticket to a chiropractor visit. I grabbed a tissue and tried to sit up straight. Hey, Elara, Connell said, walking in. Ever heard the saying, if you love someone, let them sleep? I asked in a croaky voice. He tilted his head. Doesn't ring a bell. Anyway, are you packed? Packed for what? We're going home today for Christmas, Elara. I've told you 5 times. Don't blame me if your memory is glitching. He laughed. Can you not see I feel like a total wreck? Dimwit. Connell snickered. Elara, you always look, well, unique. Don't get worked up. Just get packed. Connell, I'm not going home feeling like this. I get that you've been through a lot, but you can't avoid the family. I'm not letting you do that, Connell said, his voice rising. I feel like I have a drum set performing inside my skull. I seriously don't want to be surrounded by 5 loud, obnoxious siblings right now. Kaylee and I are sharing a room, but I'm this cranky. It's a disaster waiting to happen. Let me recover today, and I'll drive down tomorrow. Whatever. Do what you want, Connell said with a huff. I heard him packing his last-minute things. He came over to the couch before heading out. Be careful driving. There's a storm coming tonight, and the roads will be slick tomorrow. Okay, I croaked. See ya. He let himself out, and almost immediately, my phone started buzzing on the coffee table. I picked it up, too tired to even check the caller ID. What kind of soup do you like? A deep, familiar voice asked. What? I croaked. What kind of soup do you like? He repeated. Fenris. Yes. Now, what kind of soup? Elara, I'm next in line. Hurry it up. Where are you? Tim Hortons. What soup? Is there chicken noodle? Yeah. I'll take that. Great, he replied. May I ask why you're buying me soup? No, and then he hung up. Jerk. When the doorbell rang later, I knew exactly who it was. I dragged myself off the couch, my headache growing with every step. When I reached the door, I croaked out, What do you want? I brought your soup, came the simple response. Leave it in front of the door. I'll get it once you're gone. No. Muttering a few choice words under my breath, I swung the door open. Fenris was standing there with a coffee in one hand and a bag of food in the other. "Peace offerings," he said. I snorted. I really needed to stop doing that, but it's hard when you're constantly surrounded by this much stubbornness. I turned around and walked back to the couch, flopping down. Why I let him in, I have no idea. Oh, wait, I really wanted that soup. "So, any specific reason you're here?" I asked, grabbing the remote and flipping channels. "You were sick. I came to take care of you." Chapter 25. A Tim Hortons coffee cup was set down in front of me, a sliver of steam slipping out of the lid. "Coffee isn't the greatest thing to have when you're sick, you know," I rasped, picking up the cup. "That's why I got you tea." My nose crinkled, and I set the cup back down. "Yeah, no thanks. From what I can tell, you have a sore throat." "The tea will help," Fenris said, picking the cup back up and handing it to me. "Drink." I sent a glare his way and set the tea back down again. "Still not going to drink it. It's your throat. Do what you want." I rolled my eyes. "For all I know, you could have put a sedative in there," I said. "You have to admit, you couldn't really blame me for being suspicious." He didn't answer. "So what? Have you been keeping tabs on me?" I asked as he settled into a chair beside the couch. "You know, following someone around is usually a sign of a very controlling person." "I wasn't following you." "Remember the connection I talked to you about earlier?" "Oh, please, are we back to this again?" I said, trying to sit up. "If you're going to start making up excuses, I'll show you the door. I'd rather not deal with the drama tonight." I stared into his eyes, daring him to mention the bond. "I'm not making excuses. What I did before was wrong. I was simply going to explain how I knew where you were and that you were sick," he said, matching my intensity. I sat back down and pulled the blanket over my legs. "Okay, continue." "The bond gives us instincts. We can sense each other. I can feel your energy more than you can mine right now, but that's an alpha trait. I can sense when you're in pain or where you are. When you got sick, I felt it," he explained. "Wait, you can read my thoughts?" "I can sense your feelings," he corrected. "What's the difference?" "Thoughts are specific. Feelings are an echo." I can feel the exhaustion and the fever, and I knew I had to come. "I can't feel you, though," I mumbled. "We probably aren't actually linked." "We are linked, Elara." "I know that for certain," he said. "But since you're human, you won't feel the full connection until the bonding process is complete." "Bonding process?" I asked, trailing off. I saw a cheeky smirk growing on his face, and I immediately knew where he was going with that. "You know what? Never mind. I'd rather not know." A twinkle entered his eye. "Whatever you say." I picked up a couch cushion and chucked it at his face. He caught it, of course, but it was worth the attempt. I sighed, actually picking up the cup and taking a sip of the tea. "What are you really doing here, Fenris?" "I came to find redemption." "Redemption. There is a way to be good again." Those are the words that have been on my mind lately. "I'm hoping to make right the things I've done," he said, leaning his elbows on his knees and looking me in the eyes. "The Kite Runner?" I asked. "A piece of true literary art." "I'm glad you've read it," he said, a genuine smile gracing his lips. "Is that a jab at my other books?" "Maybe," the twinkle returned to his eyes. "Not a good start to redeeming yourself, mister." I thought honesty would be a good start. "Maybe," I admitted. Fenris went to the kitchen to grab some coffee while I sipped the tea. It was okay, but still not coffee. I really wondered if he could actually achieve this redemption thing. "So, please explain why the Kite Runner is better than The Fault in Our Stars?" I asked as he sat back down. "It deals with shame, courage, and real-world stakes that feel universal. TFIS is a story told a million times, metaphors and fancy words to woo a girl. There isn't as much depth to it." "Never thought I'd hear anything remotely intellectual come from you." "Congrats, you have layers," I said, clapping sarcastically. It was weird. We were actually having a conversation, not about the relationship or the werewolf war. Just a normal talk. It was a first. His phone suddenly rang. He held up a finger, stepped into the kitchen, and I heard his voice go low and sharp. He sounded upset. I stood up and hovered near the doorway. "What do you mean? What did he want?" He was pacing. No, that's not happening. Just hold him off for a couple more days until I get back. Okay, thanks. He turned around and saw me. Is everything all right? I asked. Everything is fine. I can handle it. You need to rest. Go back to bed. I really don't appreciate you bossing me around. He gave me a deadpan look. Elara, you sound like you've been eating sandpaper, you're pale, and you clearly need sleep. We both know you need to rest. I didn't say I disagreed. I just don't like the tone, I said, rolling my eyes and heading back to the couch. I heard him chuckle behind me, and I couldn't help but roll my eyes again. Chapter 26. I woke up the next morning feeling like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I was still tired, but I felt energized and a little more alive than I did yesterday. Sitting up, I scanned the room. Fenris wasn't there, but as I woke up a little more, my senses started to kick in, and I heard a commotion in the kitchen. Yawning, I got up to investigate the sound. Standing in the doorway, I watched as Fenris struggled to crack an egg while holding his cell phone to his ear with his shoulder. The scene was pretty funny. It was almost as great as a shirtless Channing Tatum cameo. Like I said, almost. Because, girls, let's face it, nothing beats that. Yeah, okay. I'll be up there as soon as possible. The egg splattered into the pan, shell and all, while a few colorful words flew from Fenris's mouth. No, I didn't call you that. Now, can I just call you back later, Leo? I'm kind of busy. Yeah, okay, thanks. Letting out a sigh, he set the phone on the counter and proceeded to fish an eggshell out of the hot pan. Wow, so agile, I said, walking in and taking a seat at the kitchen table. He let out a chuckle. Things got a little more hectic than I first expected. So, is this all part of your redemption plan? I asked. Well, it was supposed to be, but since I've already failed at making a very simple breakfast, I don't think it's working out very well, he said, staring at the mess on the counter. Yeah, honestly, I think you've made it worse, I joked. You got my stove and counters all dirty, and I'm pretty sure you burnt that egg. Did you even put oil or butter in there? I craned my neck to get a look at the pan. A nervous look entered Fenris's eyes. No, was I supposed to? Someone clearly is not used to the kitchen, I laughed. You know what? Why don't you go get ready? You're looking much better. I'll clean up this mess, and then we can go out for breakfast. He walked toward me, pulling me out of my seat and leading me toward the door. Go get ready, he said, giving me a playful nudge toward the hallway. You seem to keep messing up this redemption thing, Fenris. You've still got a lot to learn about personal space. I yelled back as I walked toward my bedroom. It was worth it. I heard him shout back. I rolled my eyes. After I was ready, I found Fenris finishing up in the living room. I approve of this image. How long are you going to be my personal assistant anyway? I asked, grabbing my coat and purse. Hopefully not long. What? Is helping me out crushing your alpha ego? I teased, giving him my best puppy dog eyes. Just slightly. Glad to hear it, I said with a smile. Get your coat, doofus. I need food. A few moments later, we were heading out and climbing into Fenris's truck. I insisted on driving this time. I wasn't going to give him any chances to take me on another unplanned road trip. Though, realistically, if he wanted to, he could have done it at the mall or earlier this morning. I figured I was safe for now. Where are we going? Fenris asked. Tim Hortons. I actually have to be back in an hour, so we'd better hurry, I said, pulling out of the parking lot. It's Canada. There's a Tim Hortons on every corner. We pulled up 5 minutes later, and I jumped out, not waiting for him. I went to the counter and ordered, with Fenris coming up behind me. The tired teenage boy on the other side of the counter started preparing our food while we waited. That guy is looking at you weirdly, Fenris mumbled under his breath, standing close to me. Why? I looked up at him. He was checking you out. I rolled my eyes. No, he wasn't, Fenris. Stop getting jealous. It's not a good look on you. His jaw clenched. I am jealous, and he was checking you out. I think you're overreacting. No, I'm not. Whatever you say, big guy. Our orders came, and I paid special attention to the guy. He wasn't checking me out. He just looked like he wanted his shift to end. Fenris was definitely jumping to conclusions. We sat at a table in the corner and started eating quietly. Fenris kept looking out the window, his eyes scanning the parking lot as if he were looking for someone. "What are you looking for, Dumbo?" "Try the sky. You might have a better chance of spotting a flying elephant," I said, giving him a smile. He looked back at me and smiled. "Sorry." But his eyes didn't stop scanning the area. He looked like he was expecting someone to jump out and attack us at any second. It was a good thing he was alert, because a couple of moments later, that's exactly what happened. Chapter 27. It wasn't an obvious attack at first, it was carefully concealed. A man, skinny, tall, with tattoos and a scar, walked toward us. He looked tough, but in his blue dress shirt and slacks, he looked like any average guy grabbing his morning coffee before heading to the office. He sat at the table next to us, briefcase in hand. Before he even sat down, Fenris had moved, pulling me toward him in a protective stance. I knew something was wrong. The man gave us a brief, unsettling smile, then immediately stood up, pushed his chair in, and walked out. He left his briefcase on the table. It only took seconds. Fenris was already dragging me toward the exit. But we were too late. I saw the man smile at us one last time from outside as he pressed a button. My world was suddenly filled with light, heat, and a deafening roar. The building was consumed by the blast. Fenris and I didn't stay to see the aftermath. We were in his truck, speeding away before the sirens even started. Fenris was white-knuckled at the wheel. I was clutching the panic handle as we flew down the 401 highway. "Fenris, where the heck are we going?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I don't know. I can't take you back to my place, not after what just happened. And I can't leave you alone," he said with a frustrated sigh. "Just bring me home," I insisted. "I already told you I can't do that." "I mean my parents' house," I replied. "Elara, you're no safer there than at your apartment. If anything, you're putting your entire family in the crosshairs." "Well, where else am I supposed to go? I could get you out of the country. Europe, maybe." I gave him a deadpan look. "It's a week before Christmas. Every flight out of Canada is booked solid." "I have a private jet," he replied simply. "I'm not going to Europe. I want to spend the holidays with my family." "I'll fly them out then." "No." Think of the questions that would raise. "Hey Mom, pack your bags. We're going to Paris with my mysterious alpha friend." I gave him the look. You know the one, the look of pure disbelief at how illogical guys can be. "Okay, fine. Go home. But I can't guarantee your safety if we go there." Fenris hit the gas. The off-ramp was coming up fast, and he swerved into the lane. A couple of minutes later, we were heading toward my childhood home. This was going to be interesting. 45 minutes later, we pulled into my parents' driveway. Fenris navigated the truck into the grass beside my mom's old minivan. I jumped out, swinging my purse over my shoulder. We hadn't even stopped at my apartment. We were both too worried there would be another surprise waiting there. We walked up the steps to the breezeway. It was a mess as always, drifting snow and freezing air. I reached the front door and braced myself. Walking in to see my family wasn't the scary part. The terrifying part was doing it with Fenris standing right beside me. The man who had disrupted my entire life was now about to meet my parents. This was going to be a long afternoon. Chapter 28. Nobody noticed when I first stepped into the house, but it didn't take long for someone to spot me. Especially with a 6 feet 4 inches wall of muscle standing right beside me. That really made me stand out. Gideon, my youngest brother, was the first to react. "MOM. Elara's home, and she brought a boyfriend," he yelled at the top of his lungs. "My family is obnoxiously loud, it's basically our brand." Gideon came running and jumped into my arms. I laughed, catching him. "How's it going, bud?" He scrambled down, seemingly uninterested in my health, and stared up at Fenris with wide, innocent eyes. "What's his name?" "Fenris," he replied. "Like the guy with the big boat?" Gideon asked. Sure." Fenris looked over at me, his brows furrowed in total confusion. "Yeah, exactly like that guy," I told Gideon. "That's what I thought." Gideon gave a toothy smile. "You want to play video games with me, Elara?" I let out a laugh. Why don't you get Fenris to play? I'm sure he'd love to. Right, Fenris? Sure. Fenris wasn't exactly smiling, but I knew if he wanted to stay in my good graces, he'd have to survive a round of gaming with an 8-year-old. Gideon grabbed his hand and led him toward the playroom. I headed upstairs to my old bedroom to freshen up. There was still a bit of soot on my face from the explosion that I hadn't managed to rub off in the truck. I grabbed a clean pair of jeans and a sweater from the closet I shared with Kaylee and hopped in the shower. When I got out, I flopped onto my bed and just breathed. Home. I loved home. It was the only place where the stress of the last few weeks finally felt like it was slipping off my shoulders. My eyes drifted shut, and for the first time in forever, I fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. I woke up to the sound of my sister, Kaylee, rummaging through the closet and grumbling. Typical Kay. She was one of those girls who always looked perfect: hair, makeup, outfit, everything. While I was at university working my tail off on unit tests and endless assignments, she was in grade 9, cruising through life looking like a catalog model. I sat up and rubbed my eyes. What's going on, Kay? I can't find my green cardigan. If I don't find it, I have to change my entire look. She huffed, crossing her arms in front of the open closet. I rolled my eyes. Kaylee, it's Christmas. Just wear a tacky sweater and jeans. It's not that complicated. But, Kay, you only get to wear a tacky sweater once a year. Live a little. She finally cracked a smile. Okay. She grabbed a loud, festive sweater, changed quickly, and sat beside me on the bed. So, how on earth did you land a guy like Fenris? She asked out of nowhere. I raised an eyebrow. I didn't land him. We aren't dating. Kaylee mimicked the eyebrow raise. Oh, really? Because, according to Fenris, you're his girlfriend. He's often delusional, I replied flatly. Then why is he here? She laughed. Well, you see, I was driving down the road in the snow, and I saw this guy. Being the good citizen I am, I offered him a ride. Turns out, he's a wandering method actor who got lost on his way to his set and had nowhere to go for the holidays. So, he's our Christmas guest. Don't worry, I'll return him to the studio eventually. Kaylee laughed again. Oh, Elara. No matter what happens, you still have that outrageous imagination. But seriously, why is that gorgeous man currently in the kitchen talking to Mom and Rowan? Wait, he's talking to Mom? Oh, fudge. I bolted upright. I rushed for the door while Kaylee yelled for me to come back and explain. I flew down the stairs and straight into the kitchen. Sure enough, Fenris was sitting at the table, looking perfectly at home while Mom and Rowan prepped dinner. When he heard me enter, he looked over with a smirk. Hey, Elara. Finally awake, I see. I thought you were playing games with Gideon, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Babe, that was 4 hours ago. I couldn't play forever. He gave me that annoying, knowing smirk. Oh. I paused, glancing at my mom. What were you guys talking about? Nothing, Elara. Come mash the potatoes, Mom said, waving me off. Fenris, what were you talking about? I whispered, leaning in. Nothing, babe. Go help your mom. I sent him a glare. I knew exactly what he was doing. He was playing the boyfriend role perfectly. He was embedding himself into my family, and while I understood why he was doing it for cover, I didn't have to like it. Actually, Mrs. Darwin, Fenris said, standing up. Do you think I could steal Elara for a bit? Mom smirked. Sure, but make sure you're back before Mr. Darwin gets here. He wouldn't be thrilled about you two being off alone. I rolled my eyes. That was true. We'll be quick, Fenris promised. He circled the table, grabbed my hand, and led me toward the front door, where our coats were waiting. A minute later, he was leading me out into the falling snow. Chapter 29. I remembered when I was younger, how I used to run around outside my house as if the world were a magical place just waiting for me to conquer it. Now I was walking in that same yard, only in a much different light. The world wasn't waiting for me to do something to it. I was waiting for the world to do something to me. Specifically, I was waiting for the next supernatural disaster or for Fenris to do something irrational. I mean, we were dealing with his grandfather. The first werewolf and an actual ancient monster. Not exactly a relaxing holiday guest. You have to imagine me walking down this gravel road with way less enthusiasm than I had when I was 8. The weight of the problems I was facing felt as heavy as Fenris's gaze on me right now. And yes, he was staring at me pretty hard. He had those intense, brooding eyes, kind of like Stefan Salvatore. It was a look that was undeniably attractive, even if I wasn't supposed to be into him that way. Snow was drifting down in clumps as we walked quietly. "You have a nice family," Fenris said suddenly. It was kind of awkward, to be honest. Like, did he really drag me out into the freezing cold just to tell me my family was nice? "Fenris," I said. "Yes. You've never been one to beat around the bush. Just get to the point," I told him firmly. This didn't feel like him. Usually, he'd skip the introductions and just say whatever was on his mind, no matter how blunt he sounded. Don't you hate how people change like that? You get a perception of who they are, and then out of the blue, they pull a move you didn't see coming. It just isn't safe here anymore, Elara. Staying at your parents' house puts them in danger. You can't stay. I rolled my eyes. Can you even hear yourself, Fenris? If Valerius wanted me gone, he'd have done it already. And who says I'm the target? Maybe it's you. I never had any problems until you showed up. I stopped and faced him, hands on my hips. Trouble follows you everywhere. He won't touch me, Fenris said, looking down from his obnoxious height. I snorted. I'm pretty sure anyone would want to take a swing at you if given the chance. You aren't exactly the most polite person in the world. He stared at me for a moment, one of those "I'm clearly the smartest person in the room" stares. Oh, don't look at me like I'm a total amateur. I'm sorry my logic doesn't match your werewolf instincts, but you need to listen. I rolled my eyes. Sometimes you just have to face the facts, Fenris. They are coming for you. I poked him in the chest, not me. I'm staying here with my family to celebrate Christmas. He took a step forward, towering over me. I disagree. I stood my ground. It doesn't matter. You don't call the shots for me. I have more authority than you think, he replied, closing the distance between us. And we both know how that struggle for control ended last time, so I don't think you'll push it, I said, matching his intensity. Fenris clenched his teeth. He ignored my comment, but the annoying truth started ringing through my brain like sand in my hair. I chose to ignore it. I could deal with the supernatural drama after Christmas. I just wanted to enjoy my time with my family. I let out a sigh. We should just head back to the house. We've only been out for 5 minutes. So? I'm cold and I want to go home. I turned and started trudging back toward the house. Wait, Fenris reached out and caught my hand. Those familiar tingles ran up my arm as our eyes locked. Let's just walk, I said, looking from the house back to him. Okay. Fenris twined his fingers in mine and pulled me close. We walked for a bit before he spoke again. All I want is to keep you safe. You know that, right? I shrugged. Sure. Not in a mushy mood? Not really. Cool. Cool. I let out a snort. Maybe cool will be our always. He let out a laugh and placed a quick kiss on my head. Sometimes you really just need to be quiet, Elara. I smiled. Chapter 30. We all sat around the kitchen table. Pots and pans were lined up in the middle with steam rising from the lids. My sister and her husband sat on the far right, with Kaylee and Brody beside them. Gideon sat next to me, Fenris was on my left, and Connell sat at the head. My parents were at the other end. It was a classic Darwin family Christmas. Surprisingly, the Fenris situation didn't make dinner weird. My dad didn't even interrogate him. In most ways, my father is a man's man, but he's never been the overprotective type when it came to our dating lives. He's more of a live and learn kind of guy. Of course, I'm pretty sure if Dad knew the actual history between Fenris and me, he'd give Fenris a serious run for his money, supernatural strength or not. The point is, Fenris was on his best behavior, which was definitely a first for our relationship. After dinner, we moved to the family room for presents. Since we're usually too broke or too cheap to buy for everyone, we do Secret Santa. This was a problem. We drew names back in September, and I obviously didn't have a gift for Fenris. Expecting me to have a gift for him was like expecting Styles not to have a panic attack during a Teen Wolf crisis. And then, of course, he had a gift for me. Now I just looked like a total jerk. Except his gift wasn't a wrapped box, it was an announcement to the whole family. A trip to a cottage up north. I knew exactly why he did it. That total troublemaker. He was in for it. You absolute pain, I snapped as we walked into my room. You did that on purpose, because you knew I couldn't say no in front of my parents. I opened the closet and grabbed a bag from the top shelf. You know this is for the best, Elara. You want to be somewhere secure, don't you? He asked, pacing the room. I clenched my jaw, throwing clothes into the bag. It wasn't your place to control where I go. Did you ever think about what I wanted? You weren't making a move, he countered. I whipped around to face him. That doesn't matter. It was my choice, and you had no right to make it for me. This is my family and my life. You need to learn to respect my boundaries instead of imposing yourself. You don't get to make those decisions for me. I stood with my hands on my hips, searing a glare into his eyes. It is my position, Elara. I'm your mate, and you're in danger. That makes it my responsibility. I rolled my eyes. Newsflash, I don't live in your world. You brought this on yourself. If you'd kept your distance in the first place, I'd never be in this mess. Maybe. But my world is part of yours now, and I'm going to keep you safe. I'd be better off without you here, I bit back. His eyes darkened, darker than I'd ever seen them. He took a step toward me, then stopped. You really think you were safe when I was gone? The minute you ran into me, that target appeared. It didn't vanish when I left. The only reason you're still standing is that I've made sure of it. Being linked to me makes you a target, especially with that mark. He took another step closer. Plus, we both know how you felt when I was away. I scoffed. That's playing dirty. But we aren't doing this your way. When we leave, we aren't going to the cabin. You can drop me at a motel. I heard him snort. So a random motel is safer than a protected safe house? Yeah, because you won't be there, doofus. He didn't say anything, but we both knew he wasn't dropping me at any motel. We spent the next 20 minutes in silence. I packed my things, said goodbye to my family with forced smiles and real hugs, and we headed out. Remember that storm Connell mentioned? It hit. Late, but hard. Fenris and I were driving, and the whiteout started when we were already 2 hours away from home. To make things worse, Fenris decided he knew the back roads to get to a motel faster. Now we were stuck. In the middle of nowhere. In the middle of a blizzard. I swear, if this were Styles, this would have never happened, or at least I wouldn't be tempted to leave him in a snowbank. Chapter 31. I changed my mind. If I were with Styles, this definitely would have happened. It was freezing, it was dark, and Fenris and I were stuck trying to shovel snow from around the tires of his truck so we could get some traction and escape this forest. I didn't get why we had to take this back road in the first place. I know, I was being a total pain. I just hate surprises, and it felt like the universe was throwing them at me in bulk lately. At first, I was handling it. Fenris showed up? Fine. Fenris got me coffee? Fine. Tim Hortons blew up? Actually, still mostly fine. But Fenris said he was taking me away again? Not fine. That was my tipping point. The last time he took me away, I ended up in a supernatural war, found out werewolves were real, and almost didn't make it back. You have to realize that the idea of being whisked away again freaked me out way more than the ancient monsters lurking in the trees. Elara. A hand waved in front of my face. I shook my head and looked up at Fenris. What? Can you try to drive? I'll push from the back while you accelerate. Yeah, I sighed, trudging through the deepening snow to the driver's seat. I twisted the key and hit the pedal. I felt the truck shift, but we were well and truly stuck in the ditch. We tried for another 45 minutes before giving up. Fenris walked back up to the front. What's the verdict? I asked, rubbing my hands together. I was sitting sideways on the seat with the door open. Fenris stood right in front of me, his legs brushing my knees. He took my cold hands in his, trying to warm them. I've contacted someone, but it'll be a while until they get here. I raised an eyebrow. I thought we didn't have a reception. He rolled his eyes, a small smirk playing on his lips. I have my ways. We paused for a moment. Now, are you going to move over? He asked. I was here first. It's my truck. You got us stuck. And I'm the alpha. What does that? My sentence was cut off as Fenris scooped me up, lifting me out of the seat. He sat down and settled me against his chest, his arms resting around my waist. He pulled the door shut. It's going to get cold. We need to share body heat, he said simply. I scoffed. I don't hear you objecting. What do you think the scoff was for? I asked. I bet he rolled his eyes. He loosened his grip. Move if you want. I'm not holding you here. I contemplated this for exactly 1 second. In reality, I just needed a good excuse to stay warm. Well, it is getting freezing out there. Fenris let out a deep chuckle. Don't laugh, I snapped. I wasn't. Stubborn jerk, I mumbled. I might be part wolf, but I'm definitely not a jerk, Fenris said, humor lacing his tone. It was hard to come up with a witty comeback when his chin was resting on my shoulder and every inch of my body was buzzing with those weird supernatural tingles. This was definitely a dangerous idea. Do you still hate me? Fenris asked quietly after a few minutes of silence. If I hated you, I wouldn't have spoken to you at the mall, or let you into my apartment, or let you meet my family. Then why the moodiness? He started asking a follow-up question, but I cut him off. Don't ask if it's a girl thing, because I will literally end you, I snapped. Fenris snorted. I'd be able to sense your mood shifts before you even felt them, Elara. That's not what I was going to ask. I was just annoyed. You aren't the easiest person to be around, okay? You love me. No, I don't. Ouch! That cuts deep. I'm sure it does. Sarcasm was heavily coating every word between us. He took a deep breath. You smell really good. He's sniffing me. Not creepy at all, I whispered. Fenris laughed again. But the light atmosphere was shattered instantly. A heavy thud rocked the truck as a figure slammed into the windshield. Wild, glowing eyes stared through the glass, locking onto Fenris's. Then, as quickly as it appeared, the creature jumped away and vanished into the woods. I shivered, the cold finally sinking in. Fenris and I sat there, stunned, before he finally opened the door. I slid off his lap, my boots sinking into the knee-high snow. We rushed to the front of the vehicle and stopped dead. There, pinned firmly to the hood of the truck, was a jagged piece of parchment. It was stained with something dark and familiar. It was a note, and Jax's scent was all over it. Chapter 32. Fenris was the first to move. I followed, but while he went to grab the note, my stomach did a total backflip. I'm going to spare you the visual, but let's just say my dinner did not want to stay down. I stood up straight, trying to shake off the dizzy spell, and turned to find Fenris reading the note. I kept my eyes strictly away from the scene on the hood of the truck and walked to his side. Looking over his shoulder, I read the words that made my blood run cold. I gave you a chance. You denied it. I gave you a gift. You ran from it. I'll give you one more chance to accept my offer before the fate of your pack matches the image in front of you. Valerius. I swallowed hard. The mental image of Valerius actually following through on that threat toward Fenris flashed through my mind, and I had to lean against the truck to keep from collapsing. What are we going to do? I asked. We were back in the cab of the truck. Fenris had moved the scene away so neither of us had to look at it anymore, but the weight of it was still there. Wait, he said. Sometimes I really struggle with Fenris. He can go from being somewhat polite to giving these one-word, alpha answers that drive me crazy. He was staring straight ahead, his jaw clenched so tight I thought it might snap. We waited. Eventually, a black SUV pulled up. It was Fenris's Beta. Fenris and I climbed out of the truck and into the new vehicle. I looked back at the truck sitting in the snow, the ominous note still fresh in my mind. Are we just going to leave him there? I asked, my voice small. Right where he belongs, the Beta said, his voice cold and obnoxious. What about his family? I asked, shocked. They can deal with it later, he replied dismissively. This guy was a total jerk. I didn't even know his name yet, but I was already mentally calling him Moody. I looked at Fenris. We're not leaving him like that. If not for his sake, then for ours. If someone finds him like this, it's going to bring a world of trouble to your doorstep. We have to handle this properly. Moody rolled his eyes, but seeing Fenris's expression, he climbed out. He handled the situation with a grim efficiency, moving the remains into the back of the SUV. He got back in and slammed the door. "Happy?" he asked with a sarcastic edge. Fenris let out a low, dangerous growl. "Ulrich, shut your mouth and remember who you're talking to," Fenris said, his tone absolutely deadly. A shiver crawled down my spine. It was a weird mix of fear and something else. Having Fenris stand up for me like that actually brought a bit of a blush to my cheeks. I knew the motel plan was officially dead. This time, I didn't argue. That note was enough to make me go wherever Fenris felt was safe. We pulled up to the massive pack house, the same place I'd been taken the first time. "Ulrich, take care of the arrangements," Fenris ordered. Fenris and I walked up the porch steps and into the house. He didn't let go of my hand, leading me through the familiar hallways until we reached his office. It was exactly as I remembered it, the boring pit of despair. He grabbed a pen and paper, but we didn't stay long. We went through a side door into a large, hardwood conference room. The table was already surrounded by people, young and old. I recognized Fenris's dad, one of his brothers, and Ulrich. Fenris leaned down and whispered in my ear, "We're having an emergency meeting about Valerius." I just nodded. Meetings aren't exactly my idea of a fun Tuesday, but with Valerius's threats hanging over us, I wasn't about to leave. Fenris led me to the head of the table, where 2 chairs were set apart. We sat down together. He began the meeting by reading Valerius's letter aloud. There were no gasps, just grim nods and a flicker of real fear in their eyes. But we didn't get very far. The heavy banging on the double doors silenced the room. When they swung open, a guard stood there, looking breathless. "Alpha, as requested, we have Flint and Lyra Hunter. They're being held in the lower level." Chapter 33. I almost had to jog to keep up with him. We were walking down the length of the hallway. The corridor was dark, painted a deep maroon, and the hardwood floors echoed with our pace, much like the ones in Fenris's office. We came to a heavy door where Fenris swiped a scanner and entered a passcode. Beyond it was a staircase leading to a basement and another door requiring a second code. Once inside, we found a row of 6 cells. I gulped as I looked into them. An old man in one cell looked up and sneered, his fangs protruding. I took a step closer to Fenris and he tightened his grip on my hand. At the end of the row was a high-security door. Fenris used a biometric scanner and a password to unlatch it. We entered a stark white room with no windows, just a table and 4 chairs. On the far side, Flint and Lyra sat, their hands secured to their chairs. Flint's head was hanging, only moving slightly to glare at us with a lip curled in disgust. Lyra was different. She was alert, her eyes darting between Fenris and me. "So, you've decided to stay with him?" she asked. I didn't answer. I didn't even know the answer myself. Fenris pulled out a chair and sat down. "Tell me what you know about Valerius and the Thanatos," he said gruffly, getting straight to the point. Flint sneered. "What are you going to do? Eliminate our brother if we don't talk?" Fenris leaned back, a devious smile playing on his face. "I don't need any more enemies. We have a common one. How about I get you out of those cuffs and get you some real food?" He analyzed them. They looked like a total wreck, their cheekbones protruding. "You look famished. We can work together on this." Flint radiated pure hate. "How do we know we can trust you?" Lyra blurted out. She looked completely drained, reminding me of Lydia Martin from Teen Wolf, that hollow, exhausted expression that somehow still looked fierce. "You can't trust me," Fenris admitted. "But Valerius's Thanatos were the ones who took Jax." "I think that's enough motivation to help me." Flint's head shot up. "Why the heck should we help you when Valerius is your grandfather? You probably have the same instincts." "There's no reason to believe your excuses," Flint spat. Fenris's smile widened, but his eyes were cold. He stood up and leaned in until he was inches from Flint's face. "The thing is, Flint, I don't need you. I never did. The only reason I'm here offering you a chance at revenge is that it was your brother's note left on my truck. I have 500 people who can get me whatever information I need." This was a courtesy. If you'd rather languish in these cells while I actually do something about Valerius, be my guest. Fenris straightened his shirt and grabbed my hand. Have a nice time rotting in here. He turned to leave, but Lyra's voice stopped him. We'll help you, she whispered, looking at Flint nervously. We'll help you. An hour later, we were in the conference room. Me, Fenris, Flint, Lyra, and Ulrich. Ulrich was being a total jerk again. He was basically the Regina George of the werewolf world, just a little guy with a major attitude problem. Lyra was recapping the information they had shared before. Ulrich sat at one of the tables, practically pouting. I rolled my eyes. At the end of 2 hours, they had laid out the only 2 ways to stop the Thanatos and Valerius. Neutralizing them in a full-scale battle. Setting the forest on fire to trap them while the pack fled for cover. Is there any other way? Fenris asked. No, Fenris. There is no other way to do this, Flint said crudely. Would you just be quiet? Ulrich snapped at Flint. I will when you do, Flint smirked. I wasn't even talking. Ulrich exclaimed. Exactly, Flint replied. So, no other way? I asked. Ulrich rolled his eyes. Isn't that exactly what this jerk just said? Actually, Lyra started. Everyone's eyes snapped to her. There might be one more way. Chapter 34. What have you got for me? Fenris asked the massive man standing in the office doorway. I remembered him from the earlier meeting. His eyes shifted toward Flint and Lyra, then back to Fenris. Can we take this into your office? He asked. Fenris glanced at the others and then at me. It almost felt like he was asking my permission to exclude the hunters from the conversation. When I stayed silent, Fenris stood up and took my hand, pulling me up beside him. I leaned in and whispered, "What was that about?" As we walked toward the office, Fenris leaned down. Later, he murmured. Once inside, the tall man closed the door to ensure Flint and Lyra couldn't hear. I was pretty sure Ulrich was outside with his ear pressed to the wood, trying to catch every word. He probably looked like Styles trying to eavesdrop on a police investigation, and honestly, that comparison just annoyed me. Fenris should have just dragged him in here, too. Elara, this is Koa. He's my head of defense, Fenris said, gesturing to the man. He also handles most of our intel. I smiled and shook his hand. Koa bowed his head slightly. Luna. I felt a wave of discomfort at the title. I knew what it meant, but I definitely wasn't ready for it. I'd really rather you just call me Elara, I said. Fenris's hand tightened around mine for a second before loosening. He clearly wasn't thrilled with my answer, but he didn't push it. Koa smiled. Whatever you say. Fenris cleared his throat, refocusing the conversation. Fill us in. We've located Valerius, Koa said, his voice dropping an octave. He's deliberately trying to attract our attention. He's currently only 30 minutes outside our territory. He arrived 3 days ago, which matches the timing of the note. You think he's waiting for an answer? Correct. And the Thanatos are surrounding his base. I believe he's planning to attack the moment you give your answer. Depending on what that answer is. Thank you, Koa. Keep a close eye on them. You're dismissed. Koa nodded to both of us before heading out. The information ran through my head, sparking assumptions I couldn't stop. Lyra had mentioned that killing Valerius might allow someone else to take control of the Thanatos. They'd still exist, but they wouldn't be under the thumb of a power-hungry madman. But Valerius was the first werewolf. He was stronger than anyone, and he had the favor of the moon goddess. If someone actually managed to kill him, would she unleash her wrath on the entire pack? It was all folklore. Nobody knew the real consequences. From the look on Fenris's face, I knew exactly what he was considering. Fenris, no, I said. He looked down at me. Don't do anything drastic, I pleaded. What else am I supposed to do? Wait for them to strike? We wouldn't survive that. We're up against half-dead monsters that are nearly impossible to stop. And wouldn't that make Valerius even harder to stop? He's ancient Fenris. We don't know what happens if he falls. Elara, we're outnumbered. We can't win a war of attrition against the Thanatos. I gulped, realizing the situation was even more dire than I'd thought. There was no easy solution. I sighed, looking back at the door. We'd better get back to the others. When I turned, Fenris was right in front of me. He placed his hands on either side of my face and leaned down to kiss me. It wasn't like before, not rushed or controlling. This was reassuring. It was a side of him I hadn't truly seen until now. The sparks were there, but they felt deeper, making me want to stay in that moment. Before I could, he pulled away and closed his eyes. What's coming won't be easy, and the outcome is uncertain. I really need you for this, Elara. I need you so I can be at my strongest. He pulled me into his chest, holding me tight. I snorted into his shirt. I don't get how I make you stronger. Last time I checked, we were total headaches for each other. Just having you here is enough, he said quietly, pulling me even closer. Chapter 35. This is how it's going to go down, Fenris said, standing at the head of the conference room table. Flint, Lyra, and I are going to enter the camp to meet Valerius. Why the heck are we going? Flint asked snidely. Because you're disposable, jackass, Ulrich put in. Flint rolled his eyes. Shut up, Ulrich. Nobody likes you. I looked over and smiled at Flint. For once, I actually agree with you on something. About time, he muttered. He looked back at Fenris. But seriously, why are we going in together? Last time I checked, Valerius wanted to make a deal with you, not us. Fenris cleared his throat. As much as that may be true, Valerius doesn't exactly have a soft spot for your family. I'm assuming he won't want you alive. You're going to be my peace offering to him. Flint stood up, shoving his chair back. That's it. I'm out. He started for the door. Sit down. I wasn't finished. Fenris's voice darkened, vibrating with the authority of an alpha. Flint turned around, his lip curled in disgust. Last time I checked, you weren't my leader. Don't ever tell me what to do again. Ever. His voice was hard, cold as ice. I may not be your leader, but you can either deal with the consequences now, or you can sit down and let me explain how we might actually make it out of this alive, Fenris said, venom lacing his tone. He reminded me so much of Derek Hale from Teen Wolf in that moment. The whole ordering people around and being scary as anything vibe. Flint clenched his jaw but finally sat back down. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Now, Fenris continued. Flint, Lyra, and I are going in. Valerius thinks you're the peace offering, but in reality, the three of us are going to try and take him out. And what about me? Ulrich asked. Am I just staying here to twiddle my thumbs? Fenris gave him a flat expression. That is exactly what you're going to do. Ulrich looked like he'd been slapped. Fenris rolled his eyes. I'm kidding. You, along with Koa and his men, will survey the outer perimeters. You'll be the backup if something goes wrong. Flint let out a snort, giving Ulrich a smug look. Stuck on lookout, like a good little scout. Ulrich growled. Watch it, Hunter. Before things could spiral, I spoke up. What about me? Fenris glanced at me. From the way his lips were a thin line and the look in his eyes, I already knew the answer. Fenris, I leveled my gaze with his. You're staying here, he said. His voice was final, as if no amount of arguing could move him. My jaw clenched. He really expected me to sit here and wait while he took on the first werewolf? I might not be Catwoman or Black Widow, but I can do more than just sit around watching reality TV. And why is that? I asked. Fenris just stared at me, not with a romantic look, but with that, is it really worth the argument, look. You just can't go. I raised an eyebrow. He raised his right back. I took a deep breath, trying to be the voice of reason. I got that he wanted to protect his mate, but I was technically the Luna. Doesn't that come with rights? I thought the Luna was supposed to stay by your side. Or some stuff like that. Wouldn't it make sense for me to be at this business meeting? No. Why not? Because my job is to protect you, and letting you walk into that camp is the opposite of that. Flint made a noise of disapproval. Actually, it would be strange for you to show up without Elara. If this is supposed to be a civil meeting, you'd bring your mate. It's expected. See? We're on a roll, Flint. That's two things we've agreed on today, I said, smiling and holding up a hand for a fist bump. Flint looked at my hand, rolled his eyes, and left me hanging. Total jerk. Rejection. Ulrich mumbled from across the room. Says the man who's never had a date, Lyra shot back. She looked at me and winked. Girl power. Ulrich went quiet. Okay, that's enough, Fenris interrupted. Ulrich is my beta. Even if he's a bit of a headache sometimes, he's still my second. He deserves respect. Lyra looked incredulous. Even when he's disrespecting us? Yes. I looked at Fenris. Even when he's disrespecting me? Fenris looped an arm around my waist, pulling me close. Not you. And then we went back to the maps. Fenris leaned over, his breath warm against my ear as he whispered, "You're still not going, Elara." This time, I ignored him. We'd finish this discussion later. Chapter 36. Fenris still wasn't letting me do anything. At all. And that was beyond annoying. While he, Lyra, Flint, and Ulrich were planning their big move, I was sitting there doing nothing. Somehow my safety was more important than the literal fate of the pack. I was their Luna, yet I was being treated like I couldn't handle a simple meeting. Fenris's logic was completely backward. He might as well be a villain from a confusing sci-fi movie. Everything he did made no sense to me. Anyway, the meeting was over and everyone was resting for tomorrow. Fenris wanted to keep things under wraps, so only a few of us actually knew the full plan. Koa was the only one busy, since he had to coordinate the massive defense force Fenris had been building over the years. Fenris was still in his office, and Lyra and I were hanging out in the meantime. We were in the lounge outside her room, planning a movie night. I was hoping for a cheesy chick flick with a hot lead actor, but I had a feeling Lyra had other ideas. Flint was in his room, probably throwing daggers at the wall, and I wasn't sure where Ulrich was. Lyra walked in with a bowl of popcorn and some smoothies. "Hey, do you know where Ulrich is?" I asked. Lyra snorted. "He's probably rewatching music videos and practicing his alpha stare in the mirror." I let out a small chuckle. "Why do you ask?" she added, flopping onto the couch. "Just wondering where everyone is," I shrugged. "You're weird," Lyra said, though she was smiling. She looked at the TV screen. "Let's just hope you have good taste in movies. Canadian Netflix is the worst, hardly any shows compared to the States. It's like we're being ghosted by the streaming industry." I was thinking a chick flick? I suggested. Fail. I rolled my eyes. Fine, what do you want to watch? Fast and Furious. I scrunched my nose. I wish The Maze Runner was on here. Then we get action and Dylan O'Brien. True, Lyra agreed. We sat there for a moment, and I noticed Lyra looking down at the popcorn bowl with a look I couldn't quite place. It was that expression people get when they're thinking about something serious, but aren't quite ready to cry. "What's up?" I asked. She looked at me, her eyes searching mine. "I just don't get why you're being nice to me. I thought you'd want me gone, and instead, we're here talking about Dylan O'Brien." "It doesn't make sense." I shrugged. A lot has happened. I'm trying to let go of the grudges. Besides, you did help me get away in the first place. I laughed. "Remember that greasy diner and the rat running across the floor?" Lyra let out a bark of laughter. "And that guy who was clearly living in his own reality?" "Yeah, that was interesting." We ended up watching Now You See Me, followed by Captain America. We spent more time talking than watching, though. "What are you going to do after this?" I asked. "Assuming we survive? Go home. Try to live a normal life." "Are you still going to be a hunter?" I asked tentatively. "I stopped that years ago," Lyra said, looking back at the TV. "Flint, Jax, and I used to be a team, but things change." I've changed. I remembered Flint mentioning something about her mate before. "Did you stop because of him?" She looked at me quickly, her brows furrowed. "Mate?" "Flint said something about you having a disagreement with someone close to you." "Flint talks too much," Lyra said sharply. She stood up and turned off the TV. "It's going to be a long day tomorrow. I'd better get some sleep." I nodded. I shouldn't have pushed. It was clearly in the past. Later, I was brushing my teeth in the en-suite bathroom. My bags had been moved into Fenris's room. In the past, I would have found another place to stay, but the more time I spent around him, the harder it was to stay away. Blame it on the bond or just my own confusing feelings. Fenris walked into the bathroom without knocking. Hey, he said, grabbing his toothbrush as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I finished up and left him to it. I went into the bedroom, grabbed a blanket and a pillow, and headed for the couch. When Fenris came out, he raised an eyebrow. Elara, it's a king-size bed. There's plenty of room. I'm good here, I said firmly. That couch is like a rock. I'm sure, Fenris. I heard him getting ready for bed and buried my head in the pillow. Finally, I heard him climb under the covers. 10 minutes later, I realized he wasn't lying. The couch was incredibly uncomfortable. I tossed and turned, trying to find a spot that didn't poke my ribs. You know the bed is still an option. Fenris's voice drifted over. Well, you're right there. I'm wearing shorts, Elara. It's fine. Sleep on the rock if you want, but don't complain when you're exhausted tomorrow. I sighed. I finally gave in, grabbed my pillow, and climbed into the other side of the bed. You're rich, Fenris. Why is that couch so bad? Because I never planned on sleeping on it, he mumbled into his pillow. I pulled the blanket up and realized how much better this was. I expected to be wide awake, but the moment my head hit the mattress, I was fading fast. The last thing I felt was Fenris's arm wrapping around me, and I heard him whisper 3 words I finally felt ready to hear. I love you. And then, cutting through the silence of the night, came the sound of claws against the building and the roar of an attack from outside. Chapter 37. Fenris was the first one out of bed, and I was right behind him. Not even caring that I was still in my fuzzy PJs, I rushed out of the room. Elara, you need to go to the basement. Ulrich will be there to get you somewhere safe, Fenris said, grabbing my hand and leading me toward the stairs. I want to help. I can help, I argued, pulling my hand back. I'll be too worried about you to focus on the fight, Elara. Please, just go with Ulrich. Fenris's eyes were shifting around the halls as if he expected an ambush at any second. He looked back at me, his expression desperate. You don't have combat training, and these things are going to be hard enough for me to handle, let alone you. You're only saying that because I'm human. I started to head toward the sounds of the commotion at the front of the house, but Fenris stopped me. I could hear the shouts and the chaos. I needed to do something. I wasn't going to spend the whole night sitting around doing nothing. Fenris grabbed my shoulders, forcing me to look at him. I don't care if you're human, Elara. You're my mate, and you haven't been trained for this. It has nothing to do with your species. I clenched my jaw. So it's just me then? No, it's the position you hold. If something happens to me, you have to survive. It's vital for the pack. He didn't give me another second to argue. He took my hand and pulled me toward the basement entrance, the same one we'd used to visit the hunters earlier. You know what to do, Fenris told Ulrich, who was waiting at the door. And then, in a blur of supernatural speed, Fenris was gone. Ulrich grabbed my arm. Let's go, he said gruffly, leading me down the stairs. We reached the bottom, but instead of going toward the cells, we went to a high-security door on the opposite side. Ulrich used a code and a handprint to get us through. We went through at least 3 more reinforced doors before reaching a final room. It was a simple, windowless living space, couch, kitchenette, bed, and bathroom. There was already a girl inside. Elara, this is my mate, Alexei. Stay here. And just like that, Ulrich was out the door. I heard the heavy click of the lock, which sent a wave of panic through me. If Valerius was as strong as Fenris feared, we were basically sitting ducks in a locked box. I looked at Alexei. She had dark hair and looked like she'd just stepped off a fashion runway. She was intimidatingly beautiful, but she didn't even look up from her book. She reminded me of Ulrich, but in a much more judgmental way. Ulrich would at least talk. She just sat there silently evaluating the room. Okay, I muttered, stretching out my arms and sitting on the opposite end of the couch. I stared at the ceiling, trying not to think about what Fenris was facing. Valerius's note was still playing in a loop in my head. I felt a surge of nausea, but I fought it down. We were going to be in this room for a while, and I didn't want to make it any more unpleasant than it already was. Who do you think leaked the info? Alexei asked suddenly. I snapped my head toward her. She was sitting up now, her book discarded on the cushions. What do you mean? Well, you guys were planning an attack, They obviously heard about it and struck first. So, who do you think the mole is? I furrowed my brows. Why are you asking me? And how did you even know about the attack? She rolled her eyes, a perfect match for Ulrich. I'm his mate. He tells me everything. I can tell. Honestly, I don't know anyone here well enough to guess. Alexei scoffed. I bet it was those hunters. I don't know why Fenris would trust them with anything vital. I shrugged. Lyra and Flint had crossed my mind, but Ulrich's tendency to talk too much made him a suspect, too. It was still late, so I decided to lie down and at least try to rest. But before I could even close my eyes, the heavy door unlatched. I looked up, expecting Ulrich, but instead, someone I never would have suspected was standing in the doorway with a sinister smile. Koa. Chapter 38. I just stared at him, standing in the doorway. What are you doing here? I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. Fenris sent me to get you both, he said simply. Why would he send you? Don't you have an army to lead? I asked. It made zero sense for Koa to be here, especially since Fenris had been so insistent on my being tucked away in this safe room. Yeah, Koa, Alexei added, standing up and crossing her arms. Last time I checked, you were the head of defense. Now you're playing messenger. There are only so many people with the clearance for this room, he replied. Come on, let's go. We don't have much time. I stood up but didn't move an inch toward him. Alexei didn't either. Koa, I think you need to leave. Now, Alexei said, her voice hard as flint. You want to play it that way? Fine. He stepped into the room, heading toward Alexei first. Alexei definitely lived up to her fierce reputation. She fought him every step of the way, but I felt paralyzed. Fenris's words were on a loop in my brain. I didn't have the training for this. Putting a civilian against a high-ranking commander wasn't going to end well. Elara. Run! Alexei shouted. I watched with wide eyes as she lunged at Koa. I knew I had to listen. If she couldn't stop him, I certainly couldn't. I turned to bolt for the door, but everything went black after a sudden, sharp impact. I woke up in a room that was utterly void of light. My hands were secured to the armrests of a chair, and my feet were tied to the legs. I couldn't see a thing. It was that thick, all-consuming darkness where you can't even see your own fingers in front of your face. It felt as if the walls were closing in, pressing against me, taking the very breath from my lungs. It was a living nightmare. It captured every sense, leaving me with nothing but my own fear. The door crashed open. A sliver of light cut through the void before the door clicked shut again. I heard the scuffing of boots on the floor and swallowed hard. My throat felt like sandpaper. A sharp click echoed, and an overhead light flickered on. I squinted, my eyes stinging from the sudden brightness. When I could finally see, Valerius was standing before me. A chill raced down my spine, and he smiled as if he could feel my blood turning to ice. I clenched my jaw and stared him down. Are you comfortable? He asked with a dazzling, predatory smile. I tried my best to mirror the tone. Extremely. This chair is top of the line, I said, my voice dripping with forced politeness. He smirked. Glad to hear it. He didn't say anything for a long moment, just watched me. When I finally looked away, he let out a low chuckle. Okay, bring him in, Valerius directed toward the door. Koa entered first, carrying a second chair which he placed directly in front of me. Then, a massive beast followed, dragging a wounded, barely conscious Fenris. My eyes widened, and a wave of nausea hit me. They sat him down and wrapped heavy chains around his wrists and ankles. I was helpless, sitting inches away from him, watching him suffer and unable to move a muscle to help. Fenris's head had been hanging low, but he slowly looked up, his gaze meeting mine. I saw his Adam's apple bob as he gave me a faint, sorrowful smile. The light in his eyes was dim, but he was still fighting. He closed his eyes for a second, a single tear tracing a path through the dust on his cheek. When he looked at me again, he didn't speak, but I saw his lips move to form one word. Sorry. Chapter 39. Now, ladies and gents, how about we get straight to it? Valerius said enthusiastically. Fenris's jaw hardened. With what? Valerius looked at us both, his eyes dancing with a terrifying light. Why, with your punishment, of course. You see, I take it very personally when family betrays me. This is going to be memorable. He let out a dry, chilling chuckle. Fenris's eyes never left mine. He wasn't even looking at Valerius. I didn't know how he could maintain that level of focus, to look at me with such intensity while a monster stood behind us. Oh, Valerius chirped. This is going to be so much fun. She'll be the first to fall in this cleansing of mine. A scream tore through my throat as the world exploded into a haze of white-hot pain. Valerius was systematically trying to break me, and the agony in my arm was so intense it felt like my entire body was being pulled apart. I had cried all the tears I had left. Now, all that remained were the raw screams that ripped past my parched throat. I remembered reading dark stories about villains like this, never thinking I'd be the one enduring the nightmare, the kind of nightmare you only read about in dark fairy tales. I could barely lift my head. Every time I tried to focus, a new jolt of pain ricocheted through me. Having fun, Fenris? Valerius sneered. Fenris didn't say a word. I looked down at the floor, watching Valerius's boots pace back and forth. What should I do next, Fenris? He asked. I have such an assortment of tricks up my sleeve. Should I keep testing her limits, or should I just end it now? He let out a snide laugh. Which shall it be, boy? Fenris remained quiet. Well, I guess you're leaving it up to me. I felt the cold, biting touch of metal against my neck. Valerius wasn't in a hurry. He wanted to savor every second of our terror. The blade traced a path down my arm, and I braced myself, praying for it to be over. Before I could react, he jerked my hand up. I clenched my jaw, fighting the urge to scream again. My body was shaking, and black dots started dancing in my vision. I wished I could just pass out, to escape the fear that was coursing through me. Humans are so fragile, Valerius chuckled. Get over it. I struggled to catch my breath. The tears were back, streaming down my face not just from the pain, but from the sheer, paralyzing fear. What's next, Fenris? Valerius asked. Then I heard a voice I had come to rely on. I think you need to get your hands off of her. The sound of heavy chains hitting the stone floor echoed through the room. Even my labored breathing seemed to stop. Then came the sound of Fenris standing up, the sound of pure hope. Valerius laughed. You think a weakened alpha can defeat me? I'd rather fight to the death than let you touch her again, Fenris growled. Suddenly, the life that had been draining out of me started to return. I managed to lift my head and saw two wolves locked in a brutal struggle. There was a clear disadvantage. The smaller wolf was already wounded and exhausted. It was Fenris. I knew he was fighting for me, but he was losing. I realized then that I wasn't as helpless as I thought. My hands were tied with rope, and Valerius, for all his self-proclaimed genius, had tied them in a way I could work with. Ignoring the stinging raw skin on my wrists, I wriggled and pulled until the rope finally gave way. With my hands free, I forced myself to my feet. My head spun, and I nearly collapsed, but I saw Valerius cornering Fenris. I couldn't wait. I fumbled with the ropes on my feet, my fingers trembling. I glanced at the fight. Fenris's teeth were in Valerius's neck, but he was being thrown back. I pushed myself up and took a step, only to fall to my knees. The impact on my injured wrists sent a searing jolt through me, but I didn't stop. I saw Fenris turn back into his human form, looking defeated on the ground. I made it to my feet again, every step feeling like a mile. I reached the door and gripped the handle to steady myself. Get up, Fenris, Valerius ordered, his voice boisterous. I expected a better fight from you. I'll make sure you have a front row seat to the end. I shifted on the floor, and my hand landed on something sharp. A massive, jagged shard of glass from a broken light fixture. I'll set you up so you can see the life drain from her eyes, Valerius taunted, taking a final step toward Fenris. And then, you will die knowing you failed. He moved closer to Fenris, bending over him. I didn't give him a chance to finish. I lunged forward, gripping the glass shard with both hands and aiming for the only vulnerable spot I could see. I think he heard me. He started to turn, but the glass connected with his throat. We tumbled to the ground together, the impact echoing in the small room. The adrenaline was a tidal wave. I couldn't feel my wrists, I couldn't feel the pain. All I knew was that Valerius was down. He wasn't going to hurt Fenris ever again. And then, finally, the darkness claimed me. Chapter 40. Fenris's POV. She was lying on the mattress, her pale skin a sharp contrast to her dark hair. Her chest rose and fell in a slow, rhythmic pattern. I touched her hand. It was still warm. It had been like this for days. She was lost in a deep, unreachable sleep. The doctor had come by, but he had no explanation. The injuries she'd sustained should have healed by now, but she wasn't waking up. I lay down on the bed beside her, taking her limp hand in mine. As I watched her, my eyes drifted shut. I was suddenly surrounded by an all-consuming darkness. It felt like a void where light couldn't exist. I couldn't even see my own hands. I couldn't wake up. Then, a blinding light erupted from the corners, bathing the room in a brilliance that forced me to look away. A woman stood before me in a white robe, holding a bow, her light brown hair shimmering. "You cannot look at me directly," she said, her voice like a melody on the wind. "Your mate. She won't last much longer. She carries too much power for a human soul. Her spirit is breaking under the weight of Valerius's legacy." "Why are you telling me this?" My voice cracked. "The darkness she absorbed from Valerius, it must be contained. If she fades away peacefully, the shadows will be unleashed. They will roam the cities, creating wars and chaos without a master." She stepped closer, though I kept my eyes averted. "You know what must be done to tether that power." "Stop." I roared, clutching my head. I had finally found her. We were supposed to be together. "You know your role, Alpha," she whispered. The blackness rushed back in. I woke up in my room, lying beside Elara. My face was wet with tears. I wouldn't let it happen. I wrapped my arms around her, holding her close, as if my own strength could keep her anchored to this world. Days blurred into nights. I sat by her bed, holding her hand as the doctor gave grimmer and grimmer reports. Her strength was fading. I told myself she wouldn't die. She wasn't allowed to die. In my dreams, she appeared to me one last time. She was standing, looking into my eyes with a clarity I hadn't seen in weeks. "Fenris, you need to listen," she said softly. "I'm listening," I whispered. "I love you," she said, and for a moment, hope sprouted in my chest like a field of wildflowers. "But whatever happens next, know that. Whatever you do won't change it." "What do you mean?" She didn't answer. She leaned in and pressed a soft kiss to my cheek. When I reached out to touch her, she vanished like smoke in the wind. A sense of cold panic enveloped me as the voice from the void whispered once more, "You know what you need to do." I woke up. Elara looked more fragile than ever. My brother, Zane, walked in and took a seat nearby. He was ruthlessly loyal, someone I could trust with the truth. I told him about the visions, about the choice. He simply nodded, his eyes full of a heavy understanding. "How long does she have?" he asked. "The doctor says days. Maybe less." Zane left the room to give me space. I lay back down next to her, pulling her hand to my chest. The reality of the situation finally settled into my soul. The room felt cold, the air thick with the scent of a fading life. I looked at the dark stains on the sheets, the evidence of the struggle to keep her here. I saw the silver blade glinting on the bedside table. My hands were trembling as I realized the bond was never meant to be a fairy tale. It was a tether, and tethers can become chains. The words that had haunted my dreams for weeks echoed one last time, loud and clear in the silence of the room. "You know what you need to do." I looked down at her one last time, my heart breaking into a million jagged pieces. And then I did it. The cycle was closed. The master was gone, and the shadows were contained. The end.